Hello, so like all the other what ifs, this isn't mine, it's a fanfic. The link is the description if you want to check it out. Anyways, let's get into it.
Hello?
Anime demigod.
Here?
Shivuki smiled as he, and his small contingent of Taki ninja, arrived at the gates of Konohagakure. He was looking forward to seeing how well Fu did. He knew she had many personality problems, and a general hate of humans, but he was confident that she could put on enough of a showing to be made a Chunin. Then he could finally teach her himself and dodge the strike to his reputation. After all, if he didn't lead Taki, then someone who was either greedy, or hated Fu would, and that would be bad all around. He was slightly worried, however, about Fu and her actions during the preliminaries. Thinking on the preliminaries caused him to scowl as they walked through the gates, after having been admitted by the guards of course. He knew Takashi was not teaching Fu correctly, but his actions during the preliminaries had caused much shame to Taki, and he could obviously see the hate he held for Fu. He shook his head as he realized he should have personally trained the Jinhuriki so as to ensure she wouldn't be stunted. He sighed as he walked into the Hokage office before freezing solid as he noticed the three most powerful Konoha ninja standing before him, with his guards detained outside. He immediately composed himself and smiled warmly at the two Sunin and ex-Hokage. "Sandaime Dano, it is good to see you again," he said, bowing to the Sandaime, before turning to Tsunade. "And might I add that your successor seems to handle the job quite well," he added, bowing to her as well. Tsunade smirked as Sarutobi smiled. "Indeed she does." "It is good to see you again, Shivuki-sama," he said, inclining his head with respect. Tsunade nodded to him. "Indeed, it is good to meet you as well. I have taken the liberty of setting you up at the same hotel as your genin and jounin. I hope you find the suite comfortable," she said, smiling. Shivuki nodded in thanks. "Much appreciated, Hokage Dano. I will take my leave then to check on my two genin and reprimand my jounin on his behavior during your exams. I am most appalled and will deal with him personally," he stated. He turned to walk out the door, but was interrupted. "I am afraid one of your genin is not at the hotel, and few people know her current whereabouts, of which your ninja are not included," Tsunade stated calmly. Shivuki froze before turning around and fixing the three ninja with a deathly stare. "Where is she?" he asked coldly. The three ninja didn't even move. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. "Why?" she asked, looking for more than a stupid answer. Shivuki stared into her eyes for a moment. "She's like a little sister to me, Tsunade-sama, like I heard Naruto is a son or nephew to you. I want to ensure her safety," he answered, still holding himself tensely, prepared to move at a moment's notice. Tsunade smiled, while Jiraiya and Sarutobi relaxed. "Good answer," she replied. "She is currently stayed with Naruto Uzumaki. It also appears that she has engaged in a romantic relationship with said man," she added, shocking the Taki leader. Jiraiya giggled pervertedly. "And her friend improved her assets a lot," he said before finding himself under Tsunade's foot. She growled at him. "I was getting to that, you pervert," she said. Shivuki looked at the two of them until Sarutobi cleared his throat and slipped him a piece of paper. "Here's his address, and I hope you'll consider Fu's relationship with a future clan head as beneficial to Konoha's continued alliance with Taki," he said, smiling disarmingly. Shivuki nearly frowned. He was being threatened, and offered a solution, at the same time. They wanted Fu to be with this Naruto character, and they were willing to destroy their relations over one man. On the other hand, this would also get Fu out of the village and into a, hopefully, loving home. Shivuki nodded and disappeared out the door, intent on taking care of his sister figure as soon as possible. Sarutobi smirked. Everything was going according to plan. Naruto may have chosen Fu, but that didn't mean they couldn't cover his bases for him. After all, what are surrogate caretakers for anyhow? Street outside of the Namikaze Estates, 10:10 a.m., 10 minutes later. Shivuki ground to a halt as Takashi jumped down in front of him. He wanted to deck the man, but held back his urge because he didn't have time to deal with the paperwork dealing with his death. Takashi smiled warmly at Shivuki. "Shivuki-sama. I have been awaiting your arrival, sir. I have some disturbing and sad news to report," he said. Shivuki narrowed his eyes. "I am busy at the moment, Takashi. Can't this wait?" he asked, hoping the jounin would back off. Takashi shook his head. "No, sir. This information is very important," he replied heatedly. Shivuki sighed and looked around before noticing they were quite alone. Apparently people avoided this section of Konoha. "Very well then, report." "We are alone here," he ordered the jounin. Takashi nodded. "First, I regret to inform you that Watashi Adame died honorably in the preliminaries of the exams. That is the sad news. The disturbing news is that his teammate, Fu, openly admitted she could have saved him, but considered him to be beneath her and let him die. Sir, you must do something about her, he said, lying through his teeth. Shivuki shook his head. The Chunin exams are a place where death is expected, not probable. If Watashi could not handle the opponent, he should have withdrawn before he allowed himself to be killed, he stated, causing Takashi's jaw to drop, before he began to shiver as Shivuki focused his ki on the Jounin, and if you ever lie about Fu again, I'll make that love tap Naruto Uzumaki gave you seem like a bug bite, he growled, before spitting at the Jounin's feet, you disgust me. When we get back to Taki, expect to be dismissed from your post and sent somewhere far away. I have allowed people like you to stunt Fu-chan's growth for long enough. Get out of my sight, he yelled at the frightened Jounin, who swiftly retreated to the hotel. Shivuki sighed, before smiling as he felt loads better at blowing off steam towards the man. He heard a low whistle come from his right only to see he had drawn a crowd. That was impressive, Shivuki-sama. I have someone here who has been waiting to see you. Naruto said, smiling as his girls chuckled behind him. Shivuki blinked and suddenly found himself in a bear hug with a squealing, and well-endowed, Fu. Shivuki-sama. I'm in the finals, she yelled excitedly, causing Naruto's group to chuckle. They hadn't seen her this excited since the day after her date with Naruto. Speaking of that date, it had become a nightly ritual for Fu to climb into bed with him, and whoever else happened to be cuddling with him. Heck, it goes so bad that just last night, Naruto had grabbed her after she had changed for bed and snuggled with her, much to her embarrassment, and told her to stop sneaking in at night. Needless to say, she had quickly snuggled into his chest and fallen asleep, being joined soon after by a tired Hana and Amaterasu, in Naruto's bed. Shivuki stood, stunned as Fu stepped back and smiled at him with a happiness he hadn't known she had possessed. Fu. Is that you? He asked, surprised. Fu's demeanor fell. Why, you don't recognize me, Shivuki-sama? She asked, slightly hurt. Naruto shook his head and stepped forward to put a hand on Fu's shoulder. Now, I'm sure it was just your presence from Nanabe-sama that threw him off, he said, giving Shivuki a disarming smile. Right. Shivuki shook his head and took in Fu, before smiling brightly. Well, it seems that bug is good for something, I suppose. It is great to see you, Fu-chan. I want to hear all about your time here in Konoha. Shivuki stated warmly. Fu squealed again and hugged the Taki leader before dragging him inside. Once again, Naruto's group chuckled. Come on, let's go make sure that Fu-chan's guest is happy with her accommodations here. Naruto said as they headed inside as well. Around 3, Fu had finished her story, including the actions of Naruto and her teammates during the exams, although she had left out the specifics of her date with Naruto, and her subsequent cuddle nights with him. Shivuki shook his head. To think I allowed this to go on for this long. Truly, I am sorry, Fu-chan, he said, bowing his head. Fu shook her head. Don't worry about it, Shivuki-sama, you did your best, that's all I could ask for, she replied, smiling at her only ray of light in Taki. Shivuki smiled back warmly. She doesn't even realize it, but she's happier here than she's ever been in Taki. As much as I wish Taki could be her home, I can't, in good conscience, drag her back to a place that openly hates her so much. His eyes flickered to Naruto, that man, a Jinchuriki, just as hated as she was. He turned out to be a fine young man, maybe he can help her, the same way he seems to help them all, he thought hopefully. Shivuki stood. I am happy to see you so well adjusted here, Fu-chan, but we still have to leave after the exams. He turned to Naruto, barely catching a glimpse of Fu's crestfallen face. I would like to thank you for taking care of Fu-chan. Would you walk with me a moment? He asked, despite the frown on Naruto's face. Naruto nodded and led the way out into the gardens, shooting his girls a look, but seeing it unneeded as they immediately rushed to Fu's side. Unbeknownst to Naruto, this caused Shivuki to smile softly. They were soon walking in the flowers, and Naruto stopped before turning around and nearly glaring at Shivuki. She is happy here and you wish to take her back to Taki? He asked evenly. Shivuki sighed and walked past him, keeping his back to Naruto. Taki is where she was born and raised. As much as I hate to say this, she is our Jinchuriki. The people would be in an uproar if she were to just stay here on a whim. Leader I may be, but I am not a tyrannical dictator, he replied. Naruto frowned as he realized this made sense. I see, but that does not mean you couldn't find a way for her to stay. An extended mission perhaps, he suggested. Shivuki shook his head, perhaps for a time, but Taki is a small village, and she is considered a protector, although more as a meat shield as you know from Takashi, he replied. Naruto growled at that, but kept quiet. Shivuki raised his head to the sky. Fu mentioned that you made her 2 promises during your date. Could you shed some light on that? He asked randomly. Naruto eyed the leader warily before sighing, I can tell you one, but not the other as it is personal. She made me promise not to let her go back to Taki, and if I have to fight you and every shinobi under your command to keep that promise, well, get ready for the fight of your lives. Naruto stated warningly. Shivuki smiled brightly, again unseen by Naruto. Taki was never one to employ political marriages in our deals with other countries, mostly because we guard our secrets closely and every shinobi knows the entrance to Taki's village proper. This means that I cannot employ such a method now, he stated, causing Naruto to frown. However, I could never, no matter the uproar, separate a man and his betrothed if they were to be wed before the finals, he added, smirking over his shoulder. Naruto blinked for only a second before his jaw dropped. Why you want me to ask her to marry me? For tomorrow, he yelled, somehow not being heard by his girls. Shivuki shrugged, if she wishes to stay here, it's the only way, he stated. Well, not really, but I can tell his promises are forever and I want a forever solution before I leave, the Taki leader thought deviously. Naruto started sweating bullets. I don't want her to say yes just because she's on a timeline, he replied, both nervous and concerned. Shivuki smirked, I'm sure she'll make the right choice, he stated. Naruto sighed and hung his head in defeat before disappearing. Shivuki hummed in delight as he made his way back to the house, I'm sure I played right into the Hokage's hands, but who cares? I played Naruto so it's all good, he thought happily as he stepped into the living room, only to be met with glares from the girls present, and a tear-stained Fu. Shivuki put his hands up disarmingly, now Fu-chan, you should stop those tears. I said we had to leave tomorrow, but we is not all-inclusive is it? He asked, smirking foxily. Fu's head perked up and she stared at Shivuki with shock in her eyes. Why you really mean it Shivuki-sama? She asked hopefully. Shivuki smiled warmly at her, we'll just have to see when Naruto comes back, won't we? He replied, confusing those present. They didn't have much time to speak before 2 things happened. 1. Hikari and Anko shunshined in looking as confused as they were and there was a knock on the door. Hana got up to answer the door as Hikari looked around. Anyone know why Naruto-kun asked us to come here? She asked, getting negative shakes from the other girls. Hana returned from the doorway with a rather surprised expression. Yujito-chan, there's someone here to see you and Naruto-kun. They said they'd wait for him to return, she said as the Raikage, Killer Bee, and Team Samui, all with smiles. Yujito squealed and immediately glumped Samui, while Kiyomi smiled at them. I'm glad to see you here. I didn't think you were coming for the exams. Yujito said happily. I chuckled, we weren't originally, but the council seems to have caused trouble yet again. I wish I could get rid of the greedy bastards, but they control all the shops in town, he commented. Kiyomi's ears perked up. What did they do this time? She asked, both curious and slightly annoyed. Samui answered the Yujito look alike. Well, they somehow caught wind of Naruto being the heir to more than the Uzumaki clan, so they wanted to pull Yujito-chan from the mission and put up 2 women as a political marriage, but I outmaneuvered them and got them to send me instead, she said, smirking in triumph. Yujito gawked at her sister figure. Why you offered yourself for a political marriage? She asked, shocked. Samui nodded, smiling softly at her sister. I had to make sure you were doing all right. Besides, there's no way I'd let them screw with you now. But maybe you should tell us what's up with your twin, she commented. Yujito blushed in embarrassment. Right, sorry, this is Kiyomi, the Nibi. She and I made a deal and she has decided to stick around and be with Naruto-kun too, she said happily. Kiyomi waved timidly. Hi everyone, she said shyly. The Kumonins all shared a look before greeting the freed cat warmly, showing no hard feelings. Unfortunately, this is also when Naruto decided to shunshin back into the house, only to freeze seeing his living room crowded with so many people. What's going on here? He asked, surprised. Samui turned and decided she would be the one to inform him of Kumo's offer. We are here because the Council of Kumo seeks a political marriage with you. They sent this contingent to offer you my hand in marriage to strengthen the tie between our 2 great nations, she said, smirking slightly. Naruto looked at her and opened his mouth to retort when he suddenly hung his head. Baa-chan, Jiji, and Ero Sennin already accepted, didn't they? He asked resignedly. The Kumo delegates nodded and Naruto grumbled as he turned to walk out the door, shocking the people there, and making Samui feel slightly hurt. "I'll be right back," he yelled as he walked out the door. Everyone blinked in surprise before Fu turned to Shivuki. "What did you do to Naruto-kun?" she asked, making everyone focus on him. Shivuki whistled nonchalantly. "I did absolutely nothing, Fu-chan. Why would you assume I forced him to do something?" he asked. Everyone's sweat dropped. "He did something," Fu said with an unimpressed look on her face. The rest of the people just shook their heads at his actions. Once again Naruto returned. "All right, I need the girls front and center," Naruto said, surprising the people once again, although Shivuki had a smirk on his face. The girls all took a step forward, shrugging. Fu and Samui, however, stayed back. He turned to them. "You two, come on," he said smirking, causing them to step forward hastily, and with curious looks on their faces. Naruto cleared his throat. "Each of you wishes to stay in this house as a part of this family for your own reasons. I love most of you, and have a strong feeling for the rest, which I believe to evolve as we get to know each other better. For one reason or another, each of you is tied to me, and I to you. I should have done this some time ago for several of you, but I will take this time now, to do what I should have done then," Naruto said before turning his back on them and making 8 bunshin. The girls couldn't see it, but he subtly handed each of the clones a box, before they all blurred into golden flashes, ensuring that no one knew who the real Naruto was. The clones turned as one and smiled, before taking a knee in front of the stunned women. "I, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, humbly ask each and every one of you to be my wife and bless me with your presence for the rest of my days," the clones said in unison, smiling as the rings were held up by each clone. The girls had varying emotions, the most prevalent among them being happiness and joy. Obviously, Hikari, Anko, Amaterasu, and Hana were overjoyed. After all, they were already mated to him, and this was just icing on the cake. Kushina and Yujito were both shocked, and touched, that he would ask them when he had yet to mark them, even when they already planned to give themselves to him anyways. Kiyomi was ecstatic because she hadn't really known if he would accept her so readily, and being asked to marry him was easy. After all, she was tied to Yujito who was going to marry him anyways. Fu was surprised, but a bit leery about the sudden marriage. She liked him, sure, but to marry him? On such a short notice? Maybe, but she didn't know yet. For Samui, it was both a shock and a surprise, as she had thought he was offended by the way she had intruded, but, apparently, he had gone back out to get another ring. Just for her. Of course, each girl's ring was unique. Hikari's was a beautiful deep blue sapphire that matched her eyes. Anko's was a deep shade of purple called alexandrite. Amaterasu, true to her flame's colors, had a beautiful jet black ring, that somehow had a silver tint to it. Hana had a deep emerald green which matched well with her eyes and hair. Kushina's ring held a deep red ruby, very much in tune with her hair. Yujito's ring held a yellow topaz, which also matched her hair. Kiyomi's ring held an aquamarine, a much lighter shade of blue than a sapphire, and one that matched her flames and hair perfectly. Fu's, however, held a beautiful deep orange citron, which matched her eyes and hair clip. Lastly, Samui's ring held a beautiful cut diamond, rather simplistic, but it matched her, supposed, cold personality. The Naruto in front of Samui smiled. "Sorry about earlier, just needed to get a ring for you too. It'd be rude to ask everyone else and not you. Hope you like it," he said. Samui just smiled and nodded, before kissing him on the cheek for being thoughtful, unknowingly giving the kneeling Naruto an eyeful of her cleavage. The girls immediately began to glomp their Narutos and it seemed to be a happy occasion until Fu yelled, "Stop," as she fixed the Naruto in front of her with a stare. "Why are you doing this? Did Shivuki-sama set you up to this?" she asked seriously. Naruto, the real Naruto, stood in front of Fu as he knew this would be hardest on her. "I promised you I wouldn't let you go back to Taki, didn't I?" he asked, getting a nod from the slightly offended Fu. "This is how Shivuki said you could stay. I refused at first, but if I have to marry you to keep you safe, so be it," he said, impressing many of those present. Fu felt anger bubbling up, but that died when he spoke his next words. "Of course, marrying you just to keep you safe is stupid. I know you want to be safe when you go to sleep at night. To not be called demon wherever you go," he said softly, gripping her chin and bringing her eyes to meet his. "I want to give you that. I want you to stay with me, and my family, and call it your home. If I happen to get the better end of the deal by marrying my ninth beautiful and kick-ass woman, well, so much the better for me, he said, smiling, while causing all of the girls to blush as they realized he called them all beautiful and kick-ass. Fu blushed but silently pulled the ring onto her finger while nodding shyly. Killer Bee chuckled, "Damn Nino, you sure are smoothie-yo," he rapped horribly. Naruto just nodded as the girls got back to thanking their personal clones, most making out furiously, although Samui opted for some snuggling instead. The congratulations started going around, even Anko and Hikari congratulating Kushina, much to everyone's surprise. They still didn't think she was good enough for Naruto, but they would give her a real chance now. Naruto smiled at this, and the cage bunchin on their arms whispered into their ears, "Snuggle tonight," causing their grins to split their faces. Soon enough, Shibuki informed them all that he would perform the ceremony for Naruto and Fu, seeing as he wanted them married before he left so the various people in Taki couldn't say shit about it, tomorrow at sunset. Naruto had smirked and told him the location of the waterfall, causing the leader to smirk in amusement as he knew Fu's favorite pastimes. Eventually everyone had left and Kushina had retired to the kitchen so she could cook dinner for the family. Fu walked in, looking nervous. "Hello Kushina-san," she said, getting a smile from the redhead. "Hello Fu-chan. Dinner won't be ready for another 10 minutes, she replied warmly. Fu shook her head. "That's not what I'm here for," she replied, getting a curious look from Kushina. She blushed slightly. I was wondering if you would do me the honor of being my maid of honor," she asked. Kushina nearly dropped the knife she was holding. "Oh really?" she asked excitedly. Fu nodded, causing Kushina to nearly squeal. She quickly dropped the knife and grabbed Fu's hands, jumping up and down eagerly. Yes, yes, yes. "Oh my Kami. We need to get you a kimono, and all that." "Oh," she said, suddenly calming down, surprising the orange-eyed female. "If you don't mind me asking, why me?" she asked curiously. Fu giggled. Hikari and Anko already asked one another, same with Hana and Amaterasu, and Kiyomi, and Yujito was asked by Samui, so. She said, somewhat embarrassed to be caught. Kushina nodded, only slightly disheartened. "That's fine, then would you return the honor and be my maid of honor as well?" she asked happily, getting an eager nod from the green-haired girl. "Then we are even," she said excitedly, glomping the poor girl before motioning for her to help with dinner. Later that night, Naruto was in his room getting ready for bed, when two women showed up at his door, in only their night clothes. Hikari and Anko blushed in front of Naruto, knowing they had hurt him deeply no more than a week ago. He smiled softly at them. "You are not out of the woods yet, girls, but you are well on your way," he said as he went to the bed, followed swiftly by his two first loves. Little did he know that he would wake up, only to find every inch of him being smothered by one of the women he was set to marry, even Samui. Granted, she had been dragged by Kiyomi and Yujito. Next day, kimono shop, 10 a.m. After waking up to find every girl inhabiting his bed, Naruto had promptly ushered them out, and gave them his wallet, so he could get ready for his wedding tonight. While he hadn't really planned it all, he had no intention of falling short of Fu's expectations, or, for that matter, his own. His first stop would be to see his sensei and teammates. They would be the best to get things ready. His first stop was to his best friend, Shino. He approached the Abarame compound and smiled as he saw that Hinata was standing outside, obviously waiting for Shino. "Oi! Hinata," he yelled, jogging up to her. Hinata turned around, and her eyes widened a bit, before becoming slightly cold. "Hello Naruto-san," she replied. Naruto internally winced but didn't show it. "Hey, you here to see Shino?" he asked. Hinata nodded. "Indeed I am. Is there something you wish to talk about?" she asked, slightly curious. Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. "Actually, I was wondering if Shino would do me an honor," Naruto said. Shino walked out at that particular moment, and, "What, pray tell, would that honor be?" he asked coolly as he moved to stand beside a visibly brightened Hinata. Naruto mentally sweated bullets. Shit, I don't know how Hinata will react, he thought before looking at his friend, and his unofficial girlfriend, and deciding to just take a plunge. "Well, you see, Fu-chan is in a bit of a bind, and I promised her that she wouldn't have to return to Taki. Unfortunately, or fortunately depending on your outlook, the only way to do that is for her to be married to someone outside of the village, before she had to return, which means that she has to marry tonight," he said all in one breath, wincing slightly as he expected Hinata's reaction. causing Hinata to gasp as she connected the dots and for Shino to raise an eyebrow. The two were silent for a moment before Shino turned to Hinata. Despite our relationship of close friends, I would not impose upon you the burden of being my date for this evening. Naruto is my closest friend, and I would be honored to stand as his best man, he said, having already drawn the conclusion as to Naruto's question. Naruto peeked an eye open to look at Hinata while smiling at his friend's words, happy that his best friend would accept despite the obvious hurt that could come from Hinata. Hinata frowned. Despite Naruto's denial of my advances, he had a valid point. And he did help us meet after all, she said, smiling softly. She glared slightly at Naruto, who looked sheepish at having to ask in front of her. She suddenly grabbed Shino's jacket and brought his face to hers. But if you think you can use this as an excuse to get some hussy to accompany you this evening, you are sadly mistaken, she said, with a slightly teasing tone in her voice. She let him go and walked away, swaying her hips. I'm gonna get ready for tonight. Pick me up at 7 sharp, Shino-kun, she said as she turned the corner. Naruto turned and looked at his, obviously, shocked friend. He held out his hand, and Shino absent-mindedly gave him a high five. Nice, Shino. She's gonna be a tiger when she fully matures. Naruto said. Shino turned to his friend. I may be whipped, but I think I can live with that. He said with glee in his voice. Now, let us finish your preparations. As your best man, I wish to see you have a complete and happy wedding. Shino said, still riding on his high from Hinata's aggressive assertion about her spot on his arm. Naruto nodded, chuckling, yes. Let's go visit Yamato-sensei, I need his help with something, and then we have Ino's flower shop to stop by, he said, giving a quick rundown of his plan so far. Shino nodded and the two vanished in a shunshin, setting out to find their sensei. Nearly an hour later, and they still hadn't found him. Where could he be? Naruto asked. Shino shrugged. I am not aware of his position at this moment, he replied. Suddenly, Yamato appeared in front of them, causing them both to jump slightly. Yo, he said, in a strangely Kakashi-esque way. Naruto calmed himself and took a deep breath. Sensei. Have you heard the news yet? He asked, getting a nod from his sensei. Indeed I did, Naruto-kun, congratulations. May I assume you are here for some other reason than to invite me to the occasion? He asked. Naruto nodded. I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Naruto said, smiling foxily. Both men knew what that meant. Naruto's girls, kimono shop. The girls were all throwing kimonos around like they were leaves off a tree. Luckily, the owner of the shop had shut the blinds so she could tend to the 9 girls exclusively, as they each wanted a wedding kimono in addition to the kimono they would wear to Fu's wedding. Unfortunately, this was the scene that Hinata walked into, before sweat dropping. She cleared her throat loudly, having gained quite a bit of confidence after Naruto's talk, and Shino's advances. The 9 girls all froze, in varying states of dress and surprise at the lavender-eyed girl. The owner of the shop, a kind old woman by the name of Hitomi, smiled at her. Gomen Hyuga-sama, but I am currently outfitting these women for the next few hours. Would you please return later? She asked kindly. Hinata shook her head. No, I think I came to the right place. It would only be fitting to be dressed somewhat like the bridesmaids if I am to accompany the best man, correct? She asked, smiling warmly. She suddenly found herself being squished by Kushina, your Hiromi-chan's daughter. Oh. You look just like her, and you're gonna be with Shino-kun? Good, good, I know just the thing, she said, quickly dragging the confused heiress into the fray. The other girls just shrugged before resuming their activities. After all, they had to look great for tonight, and whenever Naruto decided to throw them weddings as well. Hinata was dumbfounded as she suddenly found herself in a beautiful lavender kimono with snowflakes in the background. Her obi was a very light blue that faded into an orangish-colored bow behind her, with garnets embedded in the fabric. Looking around, she noticed that each of the girls was wearing a variation of her kimono, being that they held their own colors, but the obis were all the same, fading from their chosen colors to the orange-colored bow with garnets behind them. Hinata smiled, pleased with the way the kimono made her look. Hell, the girls were hot, but Hinata could nearly match Hana in bust size. She giggled slightly at her thought, but all action ceased as Fu stepped out. Said girl was blushing furiously, but she was definitely pleased with herself. Her kimono was a dim orange, matching her eyes perfectly, with light green leaves falling across her body. It looked strangely like a sunset with leaves falling across her body. Her obi was orange as well, but it held small golden studs that continued to her bow. Fu eyed herself in the mirror and, for the first time, thanked Nanabe for giving her her new bust, as it made her look drop-dead gorgeous with the slight cleavage and slit up the side to show just the right amount of leg. She turned around and held out her arms before twirling. "Well?" she asked hopefully. The girls all squealed, Hinata included, and began to dote on the soon-to-be wedded woman. Off to the side, Hitomi smiled warmly. That girl would knock her fiancé dead, and she was happy to help. After all, everyone knew who took a shine to her, and the old woman had always been kind to him, hence why the girls were shopping here instead of somewhere else. She giggled as she thought of how much money she was going to make off of this. Yamanaka Flower Shop, same time. Team 10 walked in and brightened at seeing their female member at the counter. Naruto leaned over to his teammate, and "Sensei, get ready to cover your ears," he whispered. "Hey Ino, I need your help with something," he said smiling. Ino smiled at her teammates. "Sure Naruto, what do you need?" she asked. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Yeah, I kinda need to put a rush order of flowers for my wedding," he said, as the males all quickly covered their ears, Naruto having covered them with chakra. Ino's eyes went wide. "You're getting married?" she screamed, reminding them of her previous occupation as a fangirl. Naruto fished in his ear with his pinky and nodded. "Yes I am. Tonight, 3 miles west of the gate and another 2 to the south. It's a small waterfall. I already have most of the wedding planned, but I need flowers and a certain favor from our sensei to complete it," he stated. Ino smiled brightly. "Good to hear, sorry about the scream. Who's the lucky girl?" she asked as she pulled out a catalog of flowers they currently had. Naruto smiled back. "Well, I'm marrying Fu today, but I asked all 9 girls to marry me," he replied, shocking those present. Even Shino had yet to hear everything. Naruto noticed their looks before face-palming and setting up a privacy seal. "Look, sorry, I forgot to tell you guys. So here it is," he said as he began to explain the series of events leading to this point, namely, everything that happened after the Chunin exams. Ino whistled as the story finished and it neared lunchtime, Naruto having picked out the flower arrangements whilst talking. "Okay, we are all set, and damn boy are you lucky," she said eyeing Naruto. "Get out of here and let me get to work," she said shooing them out before grabbing an apron and calling for her family. This was gonna take some work. That night, sunset. The girls had been informed by Ino, who had joined them, and suckered Chuji into being her date, that Naruto wished for them to come at the same time, right before sunset. Being his girls, they had complied, slightly curious as to what he had set up. They had kept the affair small, but nice. A few people had been invited, namely, the Kumo delegation, the Hokages, and Jiraiya, along with Shizuan, whose date was Genma, and the Ichirakus. Surprisingly, Himate showed up, looking rather pleased with the wedding setup. Tenten and Lee had been invited, via Shadow Clone, and, of course, Shino was waiting with Naruto. Shibuki was just smirking in his master's old armor, which he had polished for just this occasion. Tenten came into the Namikaze estates and smiled. "Hey girls, it's time. Ready to knock 'em dead?" she asked smiling. Fu smiled softly as she took another look in the mirror, before straightening out her kimono. "Yeah, let's do this," she said as they all disappeared in a shunshin. The girls appeared at the edge of the clearing and gasped in surprise. Stretching from in front of them up to the quaint flower-decorated wooden overhang which held Naruto, who looked both nervous and happy, were twin rows of sakura trees in full bloom. The various attendees smiled at the girls, and each of Naruto's girls, sans Fu, were suddenly taken by a shadow clone and proceeded down the aisle. Tenten followed soon after, with Lee as her proud escort, and Hinata after that, with Shino who was buzzing with happiness. However, when it came to Fu's turn, she looked around, half expecting Naruto or Shibuki to show up. Instead, a green yuki bubbled up from her body and soon formed into a man as tall as Fu, with green hair and orange eyes as well. He smiled at her. "Would you allow me to give you away to Naruto?" he asked, holding out his arm. Fu smiled brightly, unshed tears in her eyes. "Yes," she replied softly as she took it, and the two began to walk between the trees and towards the gathered audience. Far too soon for Nanabe's taste, they reached the wooden overhang and he was forced to release his charge into Naruto's care. Fu blushed as she noticed Naruto's eyes wander over her form as he took her hand. "You look radiant, Fu-chan," he said, causing her to blush harder, and beam with pride, somehow. Shibuki smiled at the couple. "Now that we are all here, let us begin the ceremony," he said, causing everyone to focus on him. Fu's left hand held Naruto's right as they turned to fully face Shibuki and the waterfall behind him, which had already begun to shine with the rays of the sun. We are here today to join together a man and a woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is a wonderful thing, something that lasts for a lifetime. It brings us both joy and sorrow, for we are forever tied to the one with which we are married. This is the bond that these two wish to create. If there is anyone who thinks they should not be wed, speak now, or forever hold your peace, he said, looking to the attending people. Not a sound was heard, nor a hand raised, and Shibuki smiled as he turned to Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, do you take Fu to be your lawfully wedded wife, to stand by her in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? He asked. Naruto smiled warmly. Always, and forever, he replied confidently. Several of his other girls were openly crying at his declaration. If he would say that for her, what could he say about them? After all, he had only met her less than a month ago. Hinata and Tenten were glancing at their dates like they should top that, while Lee and Shino were mentally cursing Naruto for being so smooth. The others' reactions varied, but most of the adults radiated pride. Shibuki's smile broadened. Good, Fu, do you take Naruto Uzumaki as your lawfully wedded husband, to stand by her in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part? He asked. Fu glanced over to Naruto, who squeezed her hand reassuringly, and caused her to smile softly. Death won't stop me, she replied softly, albeit confidently. This prompted chuckles from many of the people present. Shibuki's smile could have crossed the Grand Canyon, it was so big. He wrapped their hands together with the red ribbon as the sun started to descend. Then I now pronounce you man and wife. Remember your oaths and live happily. You may kiss the bride, he said, causing Naruto's face to split into a grin as he turned and captured Fu's lips in a searing kiss. Everyone gasped, cause as he did that, the last of the sun's rays hit the waterfall, making it glow a brilliant gold and turning into a beautiful background for their first kiss as man and wife. By this time, Tsunade, Shizuan, and all of the other girls were openly crying into their date's shoulders, for which Tsunade's was Jiraiya, who was oddly serious. Of course, Naruto's girls still had their clones, which was awesome as they received much attention from their lover/boyfriend/fiancé. The two lovebirds soon broke the kiss and everyone cheered, even Himate. With that, the festivities were on. Everyone went back to the Namikaze estate, and proceeded to either get drunk or just eat till they were ready to burst. Naruto stayed with Fu for the night, dancing and flirting with her happily as she seemed to be very relaxed in his presence. It was well after midnight when most of the drunks stumbled out and headed home, with a clone for safety of course. Fu kissed Naruto on the cheek and told him to head to bed, as they had the exams tomorrow. He protested, saying it was their wedding night, but a glare from the green-haired woman sent him packing. She watched him up the stairs before turning to the girls. I'm sorry I was the first he has to marry, and I'm not going to just sleep with him tonight. I would rather if we repeated last night and I'll get him at a later date, she said with a devious smirk. The girls all looked to one another before shrugging and heading upstairs. Naruto soon found himself sandwiched between 9 beautiful ladies, not that he was complaining. Namikaze Estates, next morning. Naruto awoke to Fu snuggling his chest and Hana on the other side with Hikari curled around his head. He smiled but realized they had to get ready. He silently made 8 cage buns hens and began to think that maybe he should just keep them around, before each of them took a girl and began to gently kiss them awake, with a slight back rub for Samui, seeing as she wouldn't appreciate the tonguing in the morning. Soon enough, Naruto was rewarded with the sounds of happy moans from his lovers even as Fu's eyes flickered open in front of him. Good morning all. As much as I love being your life-sized shareable plushie, we need to get ready for the finals, and I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen, so let's be prepared for anything, alright, he said as his girls woke up around him. Hikari yawned loudly, covering her mouth. Alright Naruto-kun, she replied, before turning to the girls. You heard him, let's get ready and meet downstairs in 20 minutes, she said, the others agreeing quickly as they began to file out of the room. Naruto smiled as Hikari winked at him before leaving. Kami, I'm one lucky son of a bitch, he said happily before getting ready himself. Nearly an hour later, at 8:30 a.m., Clan Namikaze was ready and raring to go. Naruto stepped to the door and turned around to see all of his women ready for battle. Alright, I know me and Fu-chan have to fight, but keep alert. Hikari, Anko, you two work well together, cover the walls. Hana, Amaterasu, I want you two to help civilians if anything breaks out. Kushina, I want you to team with Fu-chan and me, we will probably help Baa-chan and Sandame Jiji. Kiyomi, Yujito, Samui, you guys are on village patrol. Destroy any hostile ninja in Konoha then help out Hikari and Anko, he said, getting nods from his girls. Again, this is all tentative. If nothing happens, well, then enjoy the show, he said smiling, before turning and walking out the door. The Chunin exam finals are about to begin. Naruto and Fu appeared outside of the arena, while the rest of Naruto's fiancés appeared in the stands, finding some seats to watch the show. Naruto turned and smiled at his wife. Ready for this? He asked. Fu smirked. They won't know what hit him, but what are we gonna do about Gaara? She asked. Naruto just smirked back at her. What about him? He asked, whistling innocently as they began to walk through the tunnels leading to the arena floor, although Naruto paused mid-step before resuming, unbeknownst to Fu. Fu gave him a startled look. He's practically insane. You heard what Kiyomi-chan and Hikari-chan said, not even mentioning what happened to my ex-teammate. His seal is too weak to hold Shukaku, she replied, worried for her husband. She mentally blinked and realized she didn't have any reservations about calling him that, and it sent her heart into a beating frenzy. She blushed slightly, feeling rather happy that he could elicit such feeling after having known him for only a month. Besides, she was going to spend the rest of her life with him. It had to be a good thing that just thinking about him made her, apparently, happy. Naruto noticed her freeze and relax, deciding to leave her to her own devices and focused on the approaching entrance. No worries, honey. Gaara won't be a problem, he stated, causing her to eye him warily for a moment before nodding hesitantly and following him out onto the field. They noticed that they seemed to be the last people to show up, but oddly enough, Gaara was not present. Fu looked around, confused, as she knew that the Shukaku would be screaming at Gaara for blood and this was the easiest place to find it freely. Naruto's smirk just widened as he saw her confused face. They quickly reached the rest of the contestants and nodded in welcome, receiving various approvals from the other genin. Hayate coughed and said, all right. The Chunin finals will begin shortly. Present yourselves, to the audience, he said. Again dots are coughing, the genin all nodded and stood up straighter, except for Shikamaru, who muttered a troublesome under his breath. He then pulled out a sheet of paper. The order has been changed somewhat. Please note, this change, he stated, showing that match 4 and match 5 had been switched, leaving Gaara's match before Tamari's. Hayatai nodded as he heard the crowd roar in approval. He turned to the cage box, which was currently occupied by the Kaze cage, Reikage, Hokage, and Shivuki, seeing as he was the leader of Taki. Tsunade smirked and stood, welcome one and all to Konohagakure for this prestigious event. The Chunin exam final matches, she yelled, raising her arms in the air accompanied by another roar of approval from the crowd. Let us all enjoy this show as our shinobi and kunoichi fight for their promotions. Let the fights begin, she added, once again stirring the crowd into a frenzy. Hayate nodded again and turned to the contestants. Would everyone except Fu Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga please move to the contestant box, he requested. The rest of the fighters nodded and, after a quick kiss for Fu, they made their way off the field. Fu smiled at the younger girl, knowing of her previous affection for Naruto, and her current love interest in Shino. She also remembered that said girl had been at her wedding, and had spent the day with Naruto's girls while getting her dress. Let's make it a good one, na Hinata-chan, she asked with a cheeky grin. Hinata smiled warmly at Fu and grasped the offered hand strongly. May the best kunoichi win, she replied with a soft, but determined, voice. Fu nodded and they split away. Start the match, Proctor-san, she said as she slipped into her taijutsu stance. Hayate nodded. First match, Fu Uzumaki vs Hinata Hyuga, Hajime, he said, surprisingly, without a cough. Hinata blurred forward, intent on catching Fu off guard. Fu, while surprised, wasn't at a disadvantage. She was used to Takashi attacking her with full force, and he was faster than the genin. Fu quickly dodged Hinata's first strike and began their deadly dance. Hinata was smooth and fluid, having acquired her mother's scrolls on her water-style Jyuken, while Fu was less graceful. She was far faster and it allowed her to, somewhat clumsily, avoid Hinata's swift strikes. They spent a good minute exchanging blows, with Fu missing widely as her taijutsu had yet to be improved, before they separated, neither breathing very hard. Fu frowned at her enemy. Is that the best you have? Taijutsu, she asked, slightly disappointed. Hinata frowned slightly, my clan believes that its taijutsu is unbeatable and has declared that all its members use only our Jaiyuken, she replied, even though it left a bad taste in her mouth as she knew it left them with an extreme weakness. Fu shook her head. I'm guessing you don't agree, but you still have to follow their rules, she asked, getting a nod from her opponent. She sighed, sorry Hinata-chan. It seems your clan must learn the hard way, she said as she pulled the large red container off her back. Hinata's eyes widened and she rushed forward, having no intention of allowing her enemy a chance to prepare for an attack. Unfortunately she was too slow. Sutten, Daibakufu no Jutsu. Water release, great waterfall technique, Fu said as Hinata was swept away from the water that exploded out of the container. Fu forced the attack to slam into one of the few trees nearby before letting the attack recede, not wanting to thoroughly harm the girl. She quickly moved forward and put a kunao to Hinata's neck. Give up, she said simply, staring at Hinata. Hinata smirked and suddenly phased from view. A clone, thought a surprised Fu. She felt a stabbing pain in her back and instantly knew that Hinata had hit her. She mentally cursed and kawaramied with a log before Hinata could strike again. Hinata turned to the other side of the field, where Fu stood, holding her side. You give up. I've damaged your stomach lining and any more movement without treatment could cause it to rupture, ending in your death, she stated calmly and softly. Fu chuckled. Nanabe, she mentally asked. It's fine. Get her. He replied. Fu smirked and Hinata's eyes widened as she found the kunao once again by her throat. Never let your guard down, Hinata, even to a supposed ally. Fu said coldly. Hinata gulped and raised her hands. I give, she said, knowing that Fu caught her. Hayate nodded. Shusha, Fu Uzumaki, he yelled before breaking into coughs. The crowd was impressed with the two kunoichi and clapped loudly in approval. Even the Hyuga clan was looking at Hinata with acceptance. Fu smiled as she removed the kunao, before leaning close to Hinata. Had it been anyone without a healing factor, you would have won, she whispered softly, causing Hinata to nod, understanding that she lost only because Fu could not be stopped unless a lethal blow was dealt. The two headed for the contestant box, and were soon met by their differing love interests. Naruto gave Fu another kiss, getting her to blush, while Shino hugged Hinata before finding his hand enveloped in hers, with a smile bright on her face. Naruto looked to his best friend and smiled brightly, happy they seemed to be getting closer every day. Cage box. Rather interesting use of kawarami and Jaiyuken. The Hyuga girl isn't bad. Shivuki stated, gaining a nod from the Raikage. Tsunade nodded as well, yes that's true, but Fu also never used the super strength she showed in the preliminaries. Then again, that could be due to the fact that Hinata is far too graceful to be hit by her attacks. Still, her ninjutsu was rather powerful, she commented, this time gaining nods from everyone present. The next fight is the one that interests me. Let us watch closely, shall we? The Kaze Cage stated. Tsunade narrowed her eyes suspiciously but didn't say anything. Where is the Ichibaijin hierarchy? The masked cage wondered. Contestant box. Hayate nodded to the cage box as the two kunoichi vacated the floor. Would Shino Abarame and Suzuki Uchiha please report to the arena? He said, pausing for a large coughing fit in the middle. Shino squeezed Hinata's hand and Suzuki just grunted before jumping over the edge and landing on the floor lightly. Shino shook his head and headed for the stairs. Naruto sighed, ever the show-off that Uchiha, he said, before his enhanced hearing picked up something that made him smile. Baki, the Suna Jounin, had appeared behind Tamari and was currently whispering into her ears. He couldn't hear the Jounin, but he could hear Tamari. What do you mean Gaara's nowhere to be found and we are pulling from the invasion, she whispered heatedly. Baki sighed and again whispered to them before getting nods from them and disappearing. Naruto smirked and glanced to his girls in the stands, noticing that Kushina was looking at him. He quietly made the Umbu hand sign for attack and got a slight widening of the eyes and a nod from his fiancée before she turned to smile and talk to the other girls and rookies. He nodded, happy that she caught on so quickly before turning his attention to the arena floor. Arena floor. Suzuki and Shino quickly arrived and stood before Hayate, who looked to both contestants. They both nodded in silent acknowledgement and Hayate smirked. Second match, Suzuki Uchiha vs Shino Abarame Hajime, he yelled before jumping backwards. Suzuki and Shino stood silent for a moment before Suzuki, now clad in his black outfit having trained under Kakashi, rushed forward with insane speeds. Shino's eyes widened marginally and he quickly kawaramied out of the way of Suzuki's attack. Sasuke growled softly as his hand caused the log to hurtle across the field and slam into the wall. Shino frowned while hiding behind a tree as he knew that Sasuke wouldn't be an easy one to catch. He silently began to flood the field with his bugs, intent on draining the Uchiha's chakra before he could cause any serious damage to the bug user. Unfortunately, Sasuke activated his Sharingan, causing gasps of happiness, shock, and pride to ripple from the Konoha crowd. He was, after all, the last loyal Uchiha. Sasuke noticed the bugs and rushed for the biggest source while running through hand seals and yelling, "Katon, Gokyaku no Jutsu! Fire style, grand fireball technique," as he blasted a large fireball into the bugs. Shino cursed softly and pulled his bugs back to surround him before running through his own hand seals. Doton, Doriyuki no Jutsu! Earth release, earth wall technique, he said monotonously as a wall of earth sprang up to block the Uchiha's devastating attack. Sasuke growled again and jumped over the wall, intent on knocking the bug user out of the fight. Never let it be said that Sasuke thought ahead in his battles. The second he cleared the wall, his fate was sealed. Hihutsu, Mushidama, secret technique, insect sphere, Shino stated calmly as his insects thoroughly covered Sasuke and began to rapidly eat away at his chakra. Stands, with Naruto's girls and the other rookies. Sakura's eyes went wide. How did Sasuke-kun get caught by such a freak? She asked shocked. This caught many disapproving stares from the other genin, Kiba, and Naruto's girls especially. He rushed in without a plan and attacked an opponent he didn't fully understand. He was arrogant, and it cost him. Yamato replied calmly, even though he was sickened by the girl's comment about Shino. Kurane glared at her student. "If I ever hear you make such a comment about our allies again, I will put you through genjutsu hell," she stated sternly. Sakura visibly shrank. "Sorry sensei," she said meekly. Kurane glared at her for a moment longer before nodding. "Just keep in mind that your words and actions always have consequences, Sakura. I thought my teachings had shown you that the Uchiha is not always right, but it appears I will have to refocus my efforts," she said in her Ice Queen voice, causing everyone to shiver. Sakura paled and both Yamato and Kakashi, who had hidden his book from Kurane, looked at her with pity. Kakashi sighed and shook his head. "I would have thought I taught them better than to rush in blindly, but it seems I too will have to work on his arrogance," he added as he noticed the bugs clear away and Sasuke unconscious. Hey nodded to the victor. "Shusha, Shino Abarame!" he yelled, getting loud roars of both approval and denial from the crowd. Some of the die-hard Uchiha fans wanted to see him win, and they didn't want the bug freak to defeat Sasuke. The Jounin and Naruto's girls all sighed in frustration. That was no way to treat your comrades. Cage box. The Kazekage sneered under the cloth covering his face. So weak. I can't believe he was so arrogant, he thought disgusted. The Raikage snorted. The Abarame did very well. However, the Uchiha needs some serious work. His taijutsu and speed seem to be high, but his arrogance needs to be beaten down, he commented, getting nods from the other leaders present. Tsunade sighed. "I agree with you, Raikage-sama, and I will be talking to the boys sensei when this exam is concluded," she stated, getting a pleased nod from said individual. "In any case, let us continue with the matches," she added as she gave Genma the go-ahead. Arena floor. Hey nodded and turned to the audience. "Would Naruto Uzumaki, and Chuji Akimichi, please report to the arena floor," he stated, causing loud cheers to erupt from Naruto's girls. The rest of the crowd sweat dropped at them but otherwise kept silent as several of the kunoichi were known around town and were prone to slamming anyone who badmouthed Naruto with whatever happened to appear in their hands at that time, you know, girl pocket dimension and all. Naruto began to walk towards the stairs when Fu grabbed him and slammed her lips into his, surprising him, and getting several cat calls. "Kick his ass," she said softly before pushing him away. Naruto's cheeks had a light pink tint while his mouth showed a cheeky grin as he descended the steps. Chuji muttered under his breath about lucky blondes even as Hayate chuckled beside him. Naruto soon stood before his fellow graduate and smiled, extending his hand. "Let's make it a good match, Chuji-san," he said warmly. Chuji nodded and grasped his hand. "I'm not going to lose to you," he said confidently as Ino had promised to take him to an all-you-can-eat barbecue if he won, even though she doubted it. Naruto chuckled. "We'll see," he stated with amusement in his voice. Hayate nodded and raised his hand. Third match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Chuji Akimichi. "Hajime," he yelled before jumping far back, as he had no intention of being caught between these two genin. Chuji wasted no time and yelled, "Byubun Biken no Jutsu." Partial multi-size technique, as he raised his hand, enlarging it to several times his body size and moving to slam it down on Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened and he quickly activated his Kekii Genkai before throwing his hands up and blocking the attack, much to the shock of the audience. Naruto struggled as he held up Chuji's arm. Impressive, Chuji. You are quite powerful. However, that doesn't mean you have what you need to defeat me, he stated as he shoved the hand away. Chuji's eyes widened as he saw Naruto extend his hand and he quickly dropped to the floor, abandoning his jutsu, as Naruto yelled, Heido no Yan, Byakurai. Way of Destruction Number 4, Pale Lightning. Luckily, Chuji's actions saved him a painful attack as the lightning sailed over his head. Naruto frowned at missing and rushed forward at Chunin speeds, intent on taking advantage of Chuji's current weakness. Naruto blinked in surprise as he noticed Chuji running through some very familiar hand seals and cursed softly. Chuji jumped to his feet with his hands in the Tora sign, Katon, Gokyaku no Jutsu. Fire release, Grand Fireball technique, he yelled as he blasted forth a rather sizable fireball. Naruto smirked as he rushed right into the technique, surprising many of those present. Cage box. The Kazekage shook his head. It would appear that boy is nothing more than a pretty boy, he stated almost condescendingly. The Raikage snorted, don't be so foolish. That boy isn't stupid enough to get himself killed. His girls would go to hell and back just to kill him again if he did that. I'm sure the brat has something in mind, he said, getting nods of the heads from Shivuki and Tsunade. Shivuki may have only known him for a few days, but that didn't mean he couldn't tell that Naruto was in both an enviable and pitiable position. After all, having 9 girls as lovers is enviable, having them all on your ass when you do something stupid is pitiable. The Kazekage noted the fireball before his eyes widened in shock. It would seem I do stand corrected, Raikage Dano. You certainly know your stuff, he replied as Naruto burst from the flames unharmed. Arena floor. Naruto smirked as he passed through the flames without a scratch. His bloodline was really handy. He rushed forward to the surprised genin and slammed his hand into the boy's stomach, causing him to fly across the field and slam into the wall, kicking up a cloud of dust. Naruto peered into the cloud of dust, not sure if that put the big-boned boy out of commission. Good thing he did, because the next thing he heard caused him to immediately throw up his guard. Baika no Jutsu. Multi-size technique, and Iwa no Yorawi. Armor of Earth. Chuji yelled before adding, Nakuden Senshi. Human bullet tank, and turning into a rolling ball of stone and flesh. The ball began to turn swiftly and shot forward towards Naruto, whose eyes widened as he rolled out of the way. The following minute of the fight was Naruto dodging the attacks of the bald Chuji whilst attempting to stop the boy without severely hurting or killing him. He dodged yet another strike and watched as he began to turn and head for Naruto again before Naruto smirked devilishly. That's an idea, he thought as he began to draw in the air. Heido no Nanajugo, Hyoga Siren. Unsure, supposed to mean, Way of Destruction Number 75, Glacier Vapor Storm. Naruto yelled as his seal was completed, firing forth a massive wave of ice which split into several tendrils that slammed into the attacking Akimichi and kicked up a cloud of indiscernible mist. The crowd waited with bated breath as the mist slowly dissipated to reveal Chuji encased in a block of ice. Hey, nodded, Shusha Naruto Uzumaki. He yelled before degenerating into another coughing fit. Naruto's girls once again cheered loudly for him, although many of the shinobi present also added their support for the golden-haired ex-Jinhiriki. Naruto smiled and pulled his hand away from the glowing seal, allowing the ice to shatter harmlessly around a somewhat frozen, and shivering, Chuji. Hey decided to waste no time and watched as Chuji limped towards the medics while Naruto shunshined back to Fu, who gave him a peck on the cheek. Would Gara Sabaku and Shikamaru Nara please report to the arena floor, he said without coughing. Shimekaru muttered a troublesome and headed downstairs, but everyone else looked around for the Ichibai Jinhiriki. Naruto smirked and Fu noticed this. What did you do? She asked. Naruto scratched his cheek embarrassed. Caught her, he said, causing the woman to give her husband a deadpan look. Right. Well, Author Akuma no Jutsu. Flashback no Jutsu. Naruto was finished getting ready for the finals when he snapped his fingers, remembering a promise he made over the last month. Right, gotta take care of that, he muttered as he made a cage bunshin with a substantial amount of chakra. You know what to do, he stated before heading off to meet his girls. Namikaze sealing room. Gara sat in the middle of a large seal with a beat-up teddy bear in his lap. His eyes snapped open as he felt Naruto's chakra signature appear in the room. Do not let that man near you. Kill him. Kill him now and prove your existence to me, the Ichibai roared in his mind. Silence, mother. You do not control me, he stated coldly to the screaming Biju before tuning out the insane creature. You can make mother stop screaming and allow me to sleep, Uzumaki, he said evenly. The Cage Bunshin nodded. I promise. You can sleep safely when I'm done, and for as long as you like, he said smiling. Gaara slowly pulled his kimono of his chest, letting it pool around his waist as his sand armor dissipated to show his seal. If you lie to me, I will kill you and all in this village as mother commands, Uzumaki, he stated coldly. Get to work, he added. KB Naruto nodded and grabbed the nearby ink and brush before drawing a series of intricate seals around the seal next to Gaara's heart. He had studied the seal in case he needed to fight Gaara, but it seems that Gaara had heard of his sealing skills and actively sought him out to allow him sleep. The hard part about altering the seal is still allowing Gaara the control over sand and the automatic defense that came with it. It had taken him most of the month, including the drama with his girls, to figure it out, but he wasn't a seals master for nothing. He spent a good 20 minutes applying the seal before setting the brush and ink away. He looked to Gaara. This is going to hurt a little, just bear with me, he said before placing his hand over the seal and adding chakra. Fun, he said softly as the seal glowed and Gaara grunted in pain. Gaara frowned as he felt the pain last for quite some time and was beginning to think that Naruto had betrayed him when he heard Shukaku, "No, I won't be sealed again. Don't let my voice die. Don't. It said, its voice slowly getting lower and lower. Nearly 5 minutes later, Gaara felt a wave of exhaustion hit him. He looked up to see Naruto pointing to a futon in the corner. Thank you, Uzumaki. I shall always be in your debt, he stated as he picked up the teddy bear and made his way to the sleeping mat. KB Naruto smirked. I don't want you in my debt, Gaara-san. I would rather your friendship, he said warmly. Gaara laid down, snuggling with the bear. Friendship, he stated, the word sounding alien to him. Perhaps you can teach me this, when I awake, he said, his voice getting slower as his eyes drooped and he fell asleep. KB Naruto smiled. I would be happy to, Gaara, he said before disappearing, causing Naruto to falter mid-step. Author Kami style, flashback no jutsu, Kai. Fu smiled at her husband. That was a very nice thing to do, she stated. Tamari looked at him with wide eyes. Did you really fix his seal? She asked, almost scared to know the answer. Naruto nodded. I did, but you should get out of here. I have a feeling it's going to start soon, he said calmly, causing her eyes to go wide before she disappeared. Lee smiled brightly, talking for the first time, much to everyone's surprise. Yosh, your flames of youth, TM, burn brightly, my friend, he said happily. Naruto chuckled. It was nothing, Lee. Let it drop, we need to prepare, something is about to go down, so be on your guard, he stated seriously, getting nods from the other contestants. Cage box. It had taken Naruto all of 3 minutes to tell his story, but Gaara was still not here. Probably because he was still asleep. The Kaze Cage growled softly, not going unnoticed by the other leaders. Damn that brat. He isn't here. I'll have to go to my secondary plan. My allies and experiments will have to do the trick, he thought angrily. Tsunade turned to the other leaders. I think we should disqualify Gaara-san from the competition. He is late and obviously will not be showing today, she stated. The rest of the leaders, Kaze Cage included, nodded in assent before Tsunade gave the sign to Genma. Unfortunately, they all missed the Kaze Cage discreetly shifting his veil and his hand sign towards the crowd. Kabuto smirked behind his mask and began his genjutsu. This was going to be interesting without the Ichibai Jinhiriki to cause havoc. Arena area. Naruto growled softly as he flared his chakra, dispelling the genjutsu on the contestant box. It's begun, he said even as the arena floor became littered with several different puffs of smoke and hissing sounds. Tsunade glared at the Kaze Cage as the leaders all jumped to a nearby rooftop and his guards set up a barrier around them. I will finish what Sensei started, Orochimaru, she said, causing the veiled man to chuckle insanely. Naruto's girls, sans Kushina, all went up in smoke as the genjutsu took effect. Kushina quickly dispelled the genjutsu and set about doing the same for the rookies before jumping off to join Naruto and Fu. City streets. Kiyomi burned through another sound shinobi and smiled at her companions, Yujito and Samui. Whoever kills the most gets to make out with Naruto-kun first, she bet them, causing Samui to humph and turn away. Kiyomi shrugged as Yujito nodded earnestly, taking out yet another nin. Then let's dance, she yelled excitedly as she dove into the fray. Civilian evacuation. Hana and Amaterasu were both getting slightly annoyed as they seemed to get the most perverted men with them for some reason, but they kept up their job even as the Himuru triplets easily fended off any sound nin that got near them. Hana sighed, let's hurry this up, I hate being looked at so lewdly by these men, she said annoyed even as Amaterasu nodded in agreement. City walls. Anko smirked as she saw the hordes of monsters that Orochimaru had brought with him. She turned to Hikari, winner gets to be on top, she asked, getting a feral grin from Hikari as she dove right into the enemies, much to Anko's dismay. Hokage Monument. A cloaked figure with a swirl mask smirked as he watched the creatures attacking Konoha's walls. Yes, dance my puppet dance. Let that fool seek mindless revenge. I just wish to see this city burn, he cackled before disappearing, his voice carrying into the civilian hideaways and sending shivers down their backs. The battle for Konoha had begun. Naruto smiled as he heard Anko and Hikari's battle cries. Those enemies wouldn't know what hit them. He landed next to Kushina and Fu, both of whom were staring at the arena floor. What are those? Fu asked curiously. The creatures on the floor had snake-like legs that consisted of one powerful-looking snake tail. The scales on the bottom of the tail seemed to flutter and thrust the creatures forward. They had a roughly humanoid structure aside from the snake leg, with the females being slimmer and having anywhere from 2 to 6 arms, and wielding as many weapons, while the males were large and bulky, always with 2 arms, and most were wielding broadswords or halberds. Naga. Serpent sea people that mostly keep to themselves but were rumored to have been created by the Orochi no Yamada. Naruto replied. This just got harder because they live in Kiri, so how the hell did they get here, he asked. Kushina frowned, that doesn't matter, we have to get down there. Those Naga are strong, she observed as she watched one of the male Naga take out a Jounin with one punch. Naruto nodded and drew his sword. Right, let's join the party, the cages can take care of themselves, he said glancing to the purple barrier. Keep yourself safe Baa-chan. I'll be back for Orochi later, he thought before nodding to Kushina and Fu. The three jumped into the air and descended into the mass of Naga with twin shouts of Ryutsuzan, as Kushina and Naruto split a Naga in half, and as Fu flattened one with one strike. Their battle had begun. Outside Konoha walls, 20 minutes later. Hikari and Anko were really going to town. Hikari's hands were bathed in flame as she sliced through legions of undead, horrifying deformed experiments, and Naga alike, even as Anko covered her back, using superb accuracy and a few jutsu to supplement her partner's damage. What's taking them so long? Hikari yelled back as she decapitated another experiment. Anko shrugged as she impaled a Naga on her kunao. Dunno, I'm at 37U, she asked with a smirk. Hikari chuckled, blasting a skeleton with flames. 48. You're going to be my bitch at this rate, she said. Anko snarled, like hell. Doton, Yomi Numa. Earth release, swamp of the underworld, she yelled as she sunk a good 30 soldiers in her jutsu. Ha. Beat that, she said smirking at her partner, only to pale as she saw Hikari grin fearfully. I plan to. Kitsunbai, she yelled, forming a blue flame in her hand before tossing it into a group of Nagas, where it exploded in a firestorm killing 30 of them, and melting 10 nearby skeletons. Hikari smirked as Anko paled. Get used to being on the bottom, honey, she said before turning and walking back into the fray. Anko quickly yelped and joined her, determined not to lose. Inside Konoha, same time. Hana slammed her hand on the ground yelling, Kuki Yos no Jutsu, as she summoned Hanta and his pack. Hello everyone. I need your assistance, she said warmly as Amaterasu stood on the side. They had finished evacuating and the tide was about to turn. Konoha is about to counterattack and I believe you would enjoy hunting down a few Naga, she said smirking fearfully. Hanta chuckled, very much so, should we head for the outside or attack the ones inside the gates, he asked. Hana smirked, inside the gates first before we join Hikari and Anko outside amidst the real fighting. Please dispel yourselves if you are injured, I don't wish for you to become severely hurt over me, she said warmly. Hanta smiled, as kind as always Hana-chan. But, we like that about you, he said before turning and growling out some orders to his pack. Amaterasu turned to her friend, it's about to start, what do you say we have a little fun at the poor sound nin's expense, she suggested. Hanta and Hana chuckled, I like the sound of that, he said smirking. Amaterasu smiled and watched as the signal to counter-attack began. The group threw their heads back and howled loudly, sending chills down many people's spines, before charging forward and ripping a hole in the attacking forces. Hana using her clan taijutsu, flanked by the painted dogs who easily ripped the attacking ninja to pieces, and Amaterasu who either burned them with her flames or sliced them to pieces with her substitute sword. With Kiyomi, Samui, and Yujito. The three heard the howl and all smirked, knowing who that was. It looks like it's time to really get started. Kiyomi said as blue fire covered her hands and feet. Yujito chuckled darkly as Samui drew her sword, crackling with electricity. Yes, let's show them why they don't mess with our home, she said as lightning crackled in her right hand before a blue fire erupted in her left. The trio dashed forward and out of the alleyway in which they had taken refuge. It was time to push the attackers out of Konoha. Rooftop, with the cages, back at the beginning of the fight. Orochimaru chuckled darkly as he dodged Tsunade's fist. Finish what Sensei started? You were always the weakest of us, Tsunade, what makes you think you can defeat me now? He taunted back. He attempted to push himself back and create distance between him and the other leaders. He needed time to use his trump card, which he knew he'd need against three very strong opponents, and being close to Tsunade or A was a very bad idea. Unfortunately, A and Shivuki had other ideas. They had already started their hand seals and, by the time Orochimaru had distanced himself from Tsunade, he was caught. Two shouts of, Raiten, Jian. Lightning Release, False Darkness, and, Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu. Water Release, Great Waterfall Technique, were heard as A and Shivuki launched their attacks, effectively blending the streams of lightning and water together and hitting their target, thoroughly frying it. Tsunade jumped back, joining her two allies, and kept a close eye on the target area. She was the first to narrow her eyes as she saw mud pooling where Orochimaru was supposed to be. Damn it! You didn't get him. Stay alert, she warned the other leaders, who quickly took up defensive stances. Orochimaru cackled as he held the final sign to his technique. You are too late, Tsunadeheim. I have already ensured your defeat. Kukiyos, Edo Tensei. Summoning, Impure World Resurrection, he said, cackling maniacally. The three leaders tensed as they felt the roof tremble, before a casket rose up from the ground with the kanji for Yun on the front. Tsunade's eyes widened. Don't let him summon anymore, she warned as she rushed forward. Shivuki did the same but A ran through some hand seals, staying where he was. Orochimaru mentally cursed as he couldn't move or he'd lose all three of his little projects. Tsunade was able to slam into the mostly revealed second casket with the kanji for NII on it, while Shivuki yelled, Takigaku Ryu, Mizukiri no Yaiba. Hidden waterfall style, water cutting sword, using the water from his earlier jutsu, and slashed the casket with the kanji for show on the front, effectively bisecting it, and stopping the jutsu. Orochimaru growled in anger and launched several snakes at the two leaders, who quickly retreated to the Raikage, who was holding the last hand seal for his jutsu. You will pay for that, he hissed angrily before pulling out a seal tag as the casket front dropped to reveal Minato Namikaze, who blinked owlishly. Why the hell am I here and not doing Shinigami-sama's paperwork, he asked, before sweat dropping at the stupid question. On second thought, maybe I shouldn't have asked that, he added. Orochimaru cackled insanely, I will use you to destroy your precious village, Yondaime. He said, spitting out the title like it was soap in his mouth, not venom. Hey, he actually has venom in his mouth so spitting it out wouldn't be helpful. He walked forward, not allowing Minato any time to move, and slammed the kunao into his skull, forcing his will on the dead man. Tsunade cursed, but A smiled. Finally, a rematch. Raiten no Yorowi, he yelled excitedly. Lightning Release, Lightning Armor, I'll take the Yellow Flash, you two have Oro Team, he said as he flashed forward, engaging Minato and tearing him away from Orochimaru. Shivuki turned to Tsunade, reforming his sword from the water in the area. Let's keep him on his toes, shall we? He asked. Tsunade smirked. Yes, let's, she yelled, charging forward, Shivuki behind her. Orochimaru frowned as he had lost his edge in the battle but kept his cool. A was the only one he really worried about. These two would barely put a scratch on him. Arena floor, same time. Naruto spun and decapitated the last of the Naga. He sighed as he relaxed and took in the scene before him. Several bodies of both Sound and Leaf Ninja, along with nearly a company, approximately 80, of Naga, lay strewn across the floor. He grimaced even as the remaining Leaf Ninja, which included the senseis, his girls, and B, along with the remainder of his genin team, landed in front of him. He looked them over and nodded, several of the leaf ninja nodding back as they were mostly Umbu and Jounin level. This is our home, and these monsters dare invade it, he started angrily. Let's show them exactly why you don't mess with the best, he yelled, raising his hand in the air. The leaf ninja roared their approval and disappeared in a burst of speed, intent on proving Naruto's words true. Fu and Kushina smiled, before Fu turned to B. What will you three do? She asked. B opened his mouth, but Kurui quickly slammed her fist into his head, knocking her sensei to the floor. This is Samui and Yujito-chan's new home, and Kyumo's ally. We will defend it as we would our own village. Let's go, she yelled excitedly, dragging a despondent teammate and a somewhat lucid sensei behind her. Kushina chuckled, well, she's an enthusiastic one isn't she said smirking. Naruto shook his head, chuckling as well, as long as I'm not on the other end of her fists, she can be as enthusiastic as she wants, he commented, causing Fu to giggle. Suddenly, they all heard an insane giggle, causing them to tense. I'm a good boy. Will you play with me? Came a childish voice. The three turned to come face to mask with a black-cloaked man with a purple spiral mask on. Fu and Naruto felt Kushina's ki spike intensely as her wings burst from her back, her eyes blazing with maternal fury. You. I'll kill you, she roared as she blurred forward at speeds only Naruto, Minato, and A could match. Unfortunately, her blade passed right through the man. Oh goody. You will play with me, as we watch the village burn, he said, his voice changing halfway through to a dark and evil, but sane, voice. He began to fight with Kushina, dodging her attacks and striking back with his own, that only seemed to glance, or be shrugged off by, Kushina. You took my baby from me. You caused his life to be shit. I'll make you pay for what you did, and your master too. Kushina screamed in anguish as she desperately tried to kill the man before her. Naruto and Fu shared a look before blurring forward. If what Kushina said was true, then this man was on their death list. Outside Konoha walls, with Naruto's other girls. Hikari and Anko both looked out at Orochimaru's army and frowned. They had put a good dent in it, but it seemed that his big guns were coming out to play. They turned just in time to see the rest of Naruto's group land beside them, with Hana's summons down on the ground near the gate, tearing up anything that came nearby and seemingly enjoying it. About time y'all got here. Anko said smirking. Samui huffed. We had more important things to do than indulge in wanton violence, she stated. Anko frowned and took a step forward but was stopped as they heard several loud exclaims of, Damudo no Senshi. Soldier of the Damned, and nearly 20 of the necromancers transformed into giant burning soldiers. The girls cursed in unison before looking at one another and smirking. Sarutobi landed beside them, fully equipped in his battle gear. Hikari raised an eyebrow. Aren't you a little old to be fighting monkey? She asked. Sarutobi huffed, pink tinging his cheeks. I am not too old to defend my home, Hikari-chan. I have taken control of the forces here, but I was wondering if you girls could do something about those soldiers headed our way, he asked, having already sent Guy and Kakashi to deal with at least one, and Yamato and Kurane to another. The girls all shared a look before nodding. We'll take one for every two of us, and Anko-chan will have her own because her summons can use water ninjutsu, which they are weak against. Hikari said. The girls all nodded in agreement and quickly set off to their respective assignments. Kiyomi opting to go with Hikari, Samui, and Yujito, and Amaterasu and Hana being the teams. Sarutobi sighed as he looked out at the battlefield. There were still several soldiers that could continue unimpeded into Konoha. That is, until he heard several voice shouting, Kukiyos no Jutsu, as a large toad, hydra, and wolf, all appeared. He smirked as they each took their own soldiers, and he even took note of Killer B, aided by his genin, taking a soldier by himself. The free soldiers, he noted, were held back by many of his own Umbu, while the Jounin held the gates, with Hanta's pack for assistance. Sarutobi smirked as he pulled his bow staff and dropped to the gates. This was gonna be fun. With the rakeage, same time. Minato definitely hadn't gotten any worse in the time that he had been dead, but A had only gotten better. A definitely had the upper hand in this fight, despite Minato's self-regeneration. A had very few bruises, no cuts, and he had been throwing Minato around like a ragdoll for the past 20 minutes. It seemed, that without Minato's innate ingenuity and intelligence, that A was the better shinobi. A scoffed as he landed beside a beat-up yondaime. Pathetic, the snake man couldn't even summon the real thing, just a fake imitation. I just need to find a way to destroy him and this battle will be over, he said, shaking his head in disappointment. Suddenly he shifted, dodging a strike from Minato, whose eyes showed a little light. I'm holding back. Use barrier. Minato grunted out as he engaged the Raikage at lightning-fast speed once again. Eyes widened and he mentally cursed. He'd never have the chance to fight the Yellow Flash again, but he couldn't fight him for real because if he lost, it'd mean not just his life, but probably many of his allies as well. He growled at the yellow-haired man, I hate you. I wanted to fight you on even ground, but we don't have the time. Get ready to die again, he said as he pumped a substantial amount of his remaining chakra into his jutsu and began to pound away at the deceased Hokage. Minato, for his part, resisted the jutsu as much as possible, which was a lot because of Shinigami's hold on his soul. He was able to slow himself down several notches and allow himself to be battered around by the Raikage, who took extreme advantage of it and pounded him towards the barrier. Minato felt Orochimaru attempting to regain and control and fought it long enough to feel land a strong punch to his stomach, then a burning sensation on his back, and, finally, nothing. Aside as he watched Minato dissolve, the Kunao being the last thing to burst into flames and melt away. Rest easy, your son will do great things, Yondaime. Kami knows he's already got two of Kumo's hottest kunoichi after him, he said, smirking before turning towards where he sensed the Hokage was. It was time to end this. Over with Tsunade, Shibuki, and Orochimaru, 10 minutes ago. Tsunade punched another hole in the ceiling and growled as she had missed again. Stop moving, you damned snake, she growled at Orochimaru, who chuckled fondly at the comparison, even as he dodged another sword swing from the annoyed Taki leader. You do so flatter me, Tsunade-heim. Orochimaru said darkly. He jumped back and ran through hand seals, Doton, Dosukeryu no Jutsu. Earth release, Earth Dragon technique, he yelled as an dragon made of the clay tiles formed behind him and rushed forward towards the two leaders. Shibuki looked to Tsunade, who nodded, and they charged. Orochimaru smiled wickedly and forced the dragon to go faster, intent on crushing them both with this one blow. Unfortunately, that was not what his opponents had planned. Shibuki swiftly got in front of Tsunade and poured much of his remaining chakra into his sword. Using the empowered water blade, he quickly sliced the dragon in half, effectively cancelling the jutsu. Orochimaru blinked in surprise, and it cost him. Tsunade appeared before him and landed a perfect gut shot to her ex-teammate, sending him flying. It was, at this time, that he landed beside the other leaders, his jutsu having been deactivated to save chakra. They all watched as Orochimaru rolled, trying fruitlessly to stop himself, only to come up short as he stopped near the barrier before screaming in pain as his left arm was flung into the purple wall. The Sound Four winced as they heard their patron cry out in pain, something they had never heard before, and nearly dropped the barrier before they felt a massive ki bear down on the enemies in the area. Orochimaru stood up, eyes blazing in anger at his opponents. Suddenly, he regurgitated another Orochimaru, thoroughly freaking out the leaders, and growled softly, "You will all rue the day you decided to stop me from obtaining my goal. But, even I cannot win against these odds. You have the day, but I will win the war," he said angrily before nodding to his subordinates. The four quickly dropped the jutsu and gathered next to their patron. The leaders surged forward to stop them, but were too far away to stop their escape even as a giant snake was summoned in the arena. Tsunade growled as her personal Umbu landed next to her, "We will deal with him later, for now, secure the village," she ordered before nodding to her allies and jumping towards the gates as she felt Naruto's chakra signature in the arena. Before Orochimaru's escape. The three fiancés were definitely good, but the masked man was a master at his phasing technique and easily dodged their attacks. However, Naruto's skin also kept the man from dealing any lasting damage to the golden-haired man, while Fu's Biju, and Kushina's Uzumaki bloodline, healed them of whatever minor scratches they received. Kushina was growing more and more frustrated as she really wanted to tear this man to bits, and even Naruto's patience was wearing thin. "I'm a good boy. Good boy follows master's orders," the cloaked man said insanely as he continued to dance around their attacks. Naruto jumped back, prompting his fiancés to do the same. "This is getting us nowhere. We need to catch him by surprise, or cancel his jutsu, otherwise we are never going to hit him," he said, getting a growl from Kushina. "I'll kill him if I have to spend the next week trying to hit him. All I need is one hit," she said angrily, earning her a withering glare from Naruto. Calm down, he said, causing her to wince slightly at the disappointment in his voice and mutter a soft, sorry before they all turned back to the insane man, who was eyeing them with obvious glee. Won't you play with me? Don't good boys deserve to have some fun? He asked, cocking his head to the side, before they all noticed the purple barrier disappearing. The cloaked man clicked his tongue. We will finish this some other time, he said darkly before disappearing in a distortion. Naruto blinked even as Kushina grit her teeth in anger. Well, I guess he had something else to do. Nevertheless, let's go help out Hikari-chan and the others, he said as he gave Kushina a sad look, whose eyes just softened before nodding her agreement to his words. Fu smiled beside them. It seems that Naruto had a good effect on people when they were angry. She jumped off after the two of them and landed on the roof. They all noticed a soldier getting far too close to the gates and shared in mental curses. Naruto looked back to her. Water ninjutsu are best against them, he stated with his bloodline still active. Fu smirked. You set them up, she asked. Kushina chuckled, and I'll knock them down, she yelled as the two Uzumaki rushed forward. Naruto chuckled as well and pumped his bloodline to its max level before body slamming into the giant soldier of hellfire and iron. Kushina glared at her fiancé, not wanting to be outdone, so she flew up into the air and pumped chakra into her wings, forcing them to glow bright red as she plummeted towards the off-balance being, using her wings as protection. Funakusu no Keiko. Phoenix's Descent. She roared as she followed Naruto's lead and slammed into the transformed necromancer, who was thrown backwards and landed on several of his own soldiers, crushing them. Fu smirked widely as she landed next Todhi Being's head. Sure, make it too easy, she said sarcastically. Takigaku Ryu, Mizukiri no Yaiba. Hidden waterfall style, water-cutting sword, she yelled as she raised a large sword and decapitated the fiery being in one stroke. Naruto quickly ran to her side even as Kushina landed next to her. Nice work Fu-chan, he stated as he turned and watched the last of the soldiers being handled by his other lovers/fiancés. Looks like we have the day, he noted as the skeletons crumbled to dust. The sound ninja had long since fled, while the various experiments had all been destroyed, and the Naga were hissing in anger as they went back through the strange summoning seals they had appeared in. Sarutobi, Tsunade, A, Shivuki, B, Karui, Amwa, and Jiraiya all landed next to the trio as Naruto's other fiancés began to trickle back, all with various burns and cuts on their beings. Excellent work. We successfully rebelled Orochimaru's little spat, but I still wonder where those Naga came from. Tsunade said. Naruto sighed, I'm guessing that Orochimaru is in league with the Mizukage seeing as the Naga make their home in the waters outside of Miz no Kuni. We may have a war on our hands. He stated sadly. Tsunade frowned, if that is the case, we have to rebuild and prepare our defenses ASAP, she replied as she began to survey the damage around the area. The Raikage growled lightly, that snake dares to attack my niece's new home? You can expect Kumo's support in your war, we cannot allow that madman to continue his experiments. Besides we are allies now he stated, with nods of approval from his brother and their team. Shivuki sighed, Taki is a small nation, and we don't have many shinobi, but we will happily supply as much aid as we can to Konoha, our longtime ally, he added warmly. Tsunade smiled softly, thank you for your support. For now, we will assume that Mizu no Kuni and Ta no Kuni are in an alliance. We will determine Iwa's and Suna's positions at a later date she stated. Naruto nodded, I think Suna may be inclined to join us. Orochimaru apparently murdered their Kage and they retreated from this battle. We should seek them out first and see what caused them to ally with Orochimaru in the first place he suggested as the last of his girls joined him. Tsunade nodded, very well, good thinking Naruto-kun. You are all dismissed, we have things to deal with she said. Naruto nodded and all his girls linked arms before they vanished in a giant shunshin to take their baths and get ready for sleep. Despite what Orochimaru said, I think we will win this war, she said softly, smiling fondly at the place Naruto had just inhabited, before she shook her head and walked off, she had work to do. Orochimaru scowled as he sat upon his throne in Rice Country a month after the invasion. His plan had not worked to rid the world of Konoha and, even though he hadn't targeted him, the new kami that stopped him from marking the Uchiha and Teiwa, although she still served as one of his elite guards. He would have to correct these mistakes, and kill the kami boy, personally. Taking in his surroundings, he realized that his puppet, his old ally, his new ally, and his puppet's puppet, had arrived. Madara mentally growled looking at Orochimaru as he couldn't disobey any orders from the fallen being. The bastard had been able to retrieve his body following the Kyuubi attack and perform Edo Tensei on his soul. While he did appreciate no longer being in hell, he did not like taking orders from the snake. Even so, he had successfully captured Yagura in a genjutsu that could only be broken by someone of, at least, cage level. He had then, under Orochimaru's orders, had the man begin covertly sending the orphans to Orochimaru for experimentations. Needless to say, they had mostly been failures, but a few looked promising. After that, the immortal Uchiha had contacted the Naga, obtaining their support for the Snake Sunin. They had not used any Kiri ninja in the invasion because it would have been far too obvious that Kiri was involved, and they wanted to keep that trump for later. That being said, Kiri had never been through the bloodline wars, and had nearly as many ninja as Kyumo, but their quality was slightly better. Konoha had lost a rather sizable chunk of its forces and would be hard-pressed to defend its borders when Kiri joined the fight on Orochimaru's side. Still, Madara pondered about Iwa and Suna. Suna, being cageless, would probably stay out of war to rebuild its forces. Iwa, however, was a wild card. As much as they hated Konoha, they were wary of the will of fire, and would watch first before committing to either side. That could make or break the war. Orochimaru cleared his throat, gaining their attention. "Welcome to my humble home, and our base of operations," he said, eyeing his allies/puppets. Madara was obvious, as was the young Mizukage Yagura, however the other two required more attention. The first, his old ally, back when he was the Yamata no Orokai, Orochimaru had made the Naga as his servants, along with the snakes, and they continued to do their job well. They had more than enough soldiers to continue fighting for a decade, and Orochimaru planned to use them all, if necessary. The one leading them was a female, unsurprising considering the females were more assertive than males. Her name was Kelthanes, and she carried 6 deadly-looking scimitars. The other ally, the dark and mysterious Danzo, had brought what little of his NE forces that remained, along with several children and several supposed weak points in Konoha's security as a peace offering to the partially insane man. Orochimaru had accepted, and here we find the man. He didn't trust Danzo, oh no, but he could certainly use another tool to take the attention off of himself. Kelthanes scowled. "Our invasion was unsuccessful, my lord, and it seems that the fire ninja have declared war on you and are searching for us as we speak," she said. Orochimaru nodded. "You are correct, but despite that, we have an element of surprise. Kyuumo has taken its time in mobilizing, and we already have several points in Hai no Kuni that we can use to attack Konoha and its resources. They cannot search for you when they must defend themselves," he told the female leader. Kelthanes nodded in acceptance. Her lord made a good point. It won't take much longer for Tsunade to mobilize the full brunt of her forces. The rebuilding is almost complete. Danzo countered. Orochimaru frowned. "True, but we still have Kiri to fall back on should things get out of hand. For now, I need you to focus on getting me the strengths and weaknesses of Kyuubi's new mate and his band of bitches. I must kill him to assume my rightful place in this world," he said darkly. Danzo nodded and walked out of the council room. "Should you really trust him with gathering information on Naruto?" Madara asked seriously. Orochimaru smirked. "He will not falsify that information. Danzo wants him dead so he can control the Kyuubi. Besides, he has an axe to grind with the boy, as it was his actions that forced Danzo out of Konoha's shadow," he said confidently, getting nods from his two allies, seeing as Yagura just stood there dead to the world. "Besides, I can wait a little while before taking down the Owakama boy. It's Kyuubi and Amaterasu I wish to see break, and watching them fall in love with the container before slowly ripping him from them will be the sweetest revenge I can have," he said darkly before cackling insanely. Konoha, next day, morning. Naruto yawned as he headed downstairs to meet with his girls. It had taken Konoha a month, but everything was back to normal. Well, aside from the declaration of war on Orochimaru and the Sound Village. Tsunade had called a meeting with all Chunin and Jounin in the village, along with a few select genin, and that was the reason Naruto was currently heading to get some breakfast. After all, he couldn't be late to his promotion now, could he? He soon reached the bottom of the stairs and was greeted with a warm, but not too loud, yell of "Ohio Naruto-kun," from all his girls, sans Samui, who just nodded in his direction. Naruto smirked happily. "Ohio Mina. Everyone," he replied warmly before sitting down at the table and serving himself some eggs and bacon. "Are you all ready for the meeting today?" he asked. His answer was a medley of different yes which caused him to smile. "Good, let's finish up here. I'd like to be there a few minutes early to talk to Baa-chan, he said, once again getting various positive responses. Nearly 20 minutes later, Naruto stood outside his house, with his usual attire, along with all of his girls, some of whom were just strapping on the last of their armor or gear. "Everyone ready?" he asked, looking at them. He received a collective nod before nodding back as they all vanished in a shunshin. Hokage Tower, meeting room, 9:20 a.m. Naruto appeared, quickly followed by his girls, in a large open space that could easily accommodate all of the Akimichi clan and then some. The only people currently present were Tsunade, Jiraiya, Shizen, and Sarutobi. Tsunade looked up from the table on the small raised dais before smiling at her godson. "Ah, good to see you are all here," she commented warmly. Naruto nodded. "We are here early because I wanted to talk with you," he said, smiling softly before his face hardened. "As much as I would love to claim Tio-Yu-san's name, I think we should wait until after the war to declare that. Having IWA join with Orochimaru would be bad," he said seriously. Jiraiya snorted. "Bad is an understatement. IWA currently has as many shinobi, and jinhuriki, as Kumo, meaning they could easily turn the tide of the war. If they heard you were Minato's son, they'd stop at nothing to kill you," he stated. Tsunade sighed. "I agree with you, Naruto-kun, and I'm sorry. I know you wanted to take his name," she said sadly. Naruto chuckled. "It's fine, Baa-chan," he said, making Tsunade's eye twitch. "I can wait. It's not like it'll never come out. It'll just take a little longer than expected," he added warmly. Tsunade smirked. "Good way to look at it, Gaki," she replied, making Naruto's eye twitch. "Besides, you and your little Kunoichi squad will be on the front lines quite often, so you should have plenty of opportunities to end this quickly," she said. Naruto nodded and looked back to his girls. "You all okay with that?" he asked worriedly. Several of the girls giggled or chuckled before Hikari slammed her lips into his. "You should worry about yourself, Naruto-kun. If you die, we'll resurrect you just to kick your ass to hell and back again," she said, getting nods from her fellow Naruto fan club. "That is, until," she smirked foxily, "well, until we get bored of that and decide to do something a little more pleasurable for ourselves," she said, getting blushes from quite a few girls and a nosebleed from Kiyomi and Yujito. Naruto paled and took a step back. "I'll make sure to stay safe," he replied with fear in his voice. "Knowing my luck, they'd kick my ass for a few years then fuck me till I die," he thought with a sweat drop. Suddenly he heard perverted giggling and a pen on paper. He turned and glared heatedly at Sarutobi, who was giggling, and Jiraiya, who was scribbling away, until his little book burst into blue, red, and black flames. "I'd run if I was you," Naruto commented idly as he began to inspect his nails with disinterest in his eyes. Jiraiya and Sarutobi paled before disappearing, followed soon by puffs of smokes, and all of Naruto's girls' clones disappeared as well. Shizen, who was currently wiping blood from her nose, quickly cleared her throat. "Please don't chase them too far, they still need to be here for the meeting," she said, getting nods from the girls, who were currently smirking up a storm. Tsunade chuckled. "That is the fastest I've seen Jiraiya and Sensei run since I caught Jiraiya peeping on me," she said as she continued to smile widely. Naruto's girls just gave her several cheeky grins, or smirks, and chuckled with her. Naruto just shook his head. He needed to find some more males to hang around with or he'd turn female soon. 10 minutes later, a severely bruised Jiraiya and Sarutobi appeared in front of a conglomeration of all the Chunin, Jounin, and Umbu in the city. Many of them raised an eyebrow until they all saw copies of Naruto's girls appear and flash victory signs to Tsunade and Shizen before disappearing. Tsunade chuckled at the confused looks many were sending their previous leader and her teammate. "Don't worry about them. Just some payback," she said with a smirk, causing both men to just cough and look away. Tsunade then turned serious. "Now, since everyone is here, I believe we should begin," she said, getting nods from most of the congregation. "First order of business, Shino Abarame and Shikamaru Nara, please step forward," she said. The two mentioned genin stepped forward, rather curious as to what was going on. Tsunade looked to Shizen, who handed her 2 green flak jackets. "I am proud to announce that both of you have given a very good showing in the exams and in the following aftermath. You have both been selected to be promoted to Chunin rank. Congratulations," she said smiling. Cheers and congratulations erupted from the room as many of the higher-ranked members welcomed the new Chunins to their group. Naruto was one of the first to shake Shino's hands while Asuma was the first to shake Shikamaru's own. After nearly a minute of congratulations, Tsunade called the meeting back into order. As people got back into lines so everyone could see, Tsunade called forth Naruto and all of his girls. Naruto blinked, as did his girls, before lining up as Tsunade gave them a glare to hustle along. She smiled, however, when they all stood before her, with Naruto in the center. I have decided to formally announce each of your ranks, along with promoting a few of you in accordance with your skills, she stated, getting surprised looks from Naruto and his group, along with several of the ninja in the room. Of course, I'm sure none of you will want the flak jackets, so we will skip that, she added with a smirk. Tsunade proceeded to walk down the line to Samui, who was on the far right. Samui NII. Skills would place you at low Jounin, and your experience is high Chunin. Currently, you are being given the Chunin rank until your experience and skills increase, she said, getting a nod from Samui as she knew her talent level. Tsunade walked to the next in line, who happened to be Fu Uzumaki. Skills are at mid Chunin, experience at low Chunin including the invasion. Chunin rank it is, she said, smirking, causing the orange-eyed girl to nod and silently resolve to get stronger. Tsunade's smirk widened at seeing the fiery determination in her eyes. Once again, Tsunade moved down the line. Hana and Yuzuka. Skills at high Jounin, experience at mid Jounin. Current rank, Takubutsu Jounin, she said, smiling widely at her part-time student in the medical arts. Hana just smiled broadly at the increase in rank in acknowledgement of her increase in power. Moving down the line, Tsunade's smirk didn't falter. Kushina Uzumaki. Skills, mid-cage. Experience, mid-cage. Current rank, Finikusu Senin, she said, causing many eyes to widen as sages were very rare and on the same level as the legendary Sunin. Kushina just folded her arms and smirked. Tsunade chuckled as she moved to her next objective. Naruto Uzumaki. Skills, low cage. Experience, mid-Chunin with the invasion. Current rank, Takubutsu Jounin, she said, gaining a heartwarming smile from her godson. Tsunade wasted no time and, after a nod from her godson, quickly moved on. Kiyomi Nii. Skills, high Umbu. Experience, high Jounin. Current rank, Jounin, she stated, getting a V for victory from the two-tailed cat. Yujito sighed in exasperation and smacked her upside the head, causing her to stumble before chuckling nervously. Tsunade chuckled again as she stepped farther down the line. Yujito Nii. Skills, mid Umbu. Experience, high Jounin. Current rank, Jounin, she said, causing Yujito to smile and nod in appreciation to her commander-in-chief. Many of the people in the room were rather surprised that Naruto had so many high-ranked women with him. It was rather surprising to have so many people with such power under one roof. Tsunade smirked as she moved to the next person, knowing she had earned this. Anko Mitarashi. Skills, high Umbu. Experience, low Umbu. Current rank, Jounin, she said, smiling as Anko's face split into a shit-eating grin. She had been trying for years to get promoted and it seems that it finally paid off. Tsunade smiled warmly at the last two people in line and knew this would throw many for a loop. Hikari Yoko. Skills, mid-cage. Experience, high cage. Current rank, Kitsune Senin, she stated, causing many of the people in the room to gasp. Foxes were still taboo in most places of Konoha, so to hear that a fox sage, of all things, existed was quite a shock. Still, Tsunade sent them a glare as she moved to the last one in line. Amaterasu Okamai. Skills, high cage. Experience, high cage. Current rank, Okamai Senin, she said as everyone's eyes bugged out. That meant that Konoha was currently home to 4 sages, 3 of which were fiancés to Naruto himself. Tsunade smiled at them before moving back to the raised dais. That is all for promotions at this time. Now, let's talk deployments, she said as she motioned Shikaku forward. Shikaku sighed out a troublesome before straightening up. As of now, we have intelligence that suggests Orochimaru may be able to move his troops into our lands without opposition by some type of seals or ritual like the one used for the Naga during the invasion. We need to assemble teams to search for these warp points as we have named them, and we need to assemble teams for frontline combat as well as border patrols, he stated seriously. Tsunade nodded. Good summary. We do need these teams, but we also need suggestions for rotations so that our shinobi have time to train and increase their chances on a battlefield. In addition, I am going to start assigning every frontline squad a medic. I will attempt to assign border patrols a medic as well, but it may not be possible, she stated, getting nods of approval from many of the assembled ninja. Naruto raised his hand, surprising many. May I suggest that the search teams also have someone with some knowledge of seals, so maybe we could study these warp points and somehow turn them to our advantage, he asked. Tsunade nodded. That is one idea I had hoped to implement, but that isn't possible at the current moment. The only people remotely familiar with seals in an in-depth manner are Jiraiya, Sensei, and yourself, Naruto. Of the three, only you have the time to really search for them, she stated. Amaterasu cleared her throat. I wouldn't be so sure. I'm pretty sure myself, Hikari, and Kiyomi have enough knowledge on seals to at least copy and identify a few sections of the warp points so that Naruto-kun or one of the other masters could break it down, she replied. Tsunade's eyes widened before smirking. That's good. We can send each of you out to search a section of Hi-no-Kuni. We should set up your squads ASAP so you can leave today, she said excitedly. Naruto suddenly chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his head. Baa-chan. Could we leave tomorrow instead? He asked. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at her godson. Why should we delay any longer? She asked with a tone promising pain. Naruto chuckled again. I sorta have a date today with Kiyomi-chan and she threatened something important if we don't have some time together, he said nervously as he remembered yesterday's sparring session. Author Akuma Jutsu. Flashback no Jutsu. Naruto was currently in his clan training ground fighting Yujito and Kiyomi at the same time. He had agreed to test their prowess together and was very impressed. He had to go all out without using any lethal techniques in order to keep up with the well-synced duo. He knocked the two back before calling an end to the spar. "Yeah, I can see why you two came out of the invasion without a scratch. With your teamwork and Samui's backup, you must have been damn near untouchable," he said as he gained his breath. Yujito and Kiyomi flushed at the praise. "You're far too kind. We could still be better," Yujito said, shaking her head. Kiyomi suddenly grabbed Yujito's arm. "We'll be right back with some water, Naruto-kun," she said as she dragging a surprised Yujito off. Naruto just grunted as he laid on the ground, still trying to catch the last of his breath. He heard the two whispering as they headed inside, but shrugged it off as it wasn't his place to spy on their personal talking. Several minutes later, he heard the crunching of footsteps as the two returned. His eyes creaked open as he had dozed slightly while basking in the sun. He took notice that Kiyomi and Yujito both had knowing smirks while Yujito couldn't meet his gaze and was blushing. He didn't know what they planned, but he had a feeling it would be fun for all of them. Kiyomi and Yujito both sat down on either side of him, Yujito to the right, and Kiyomi to the left, as Yujito handed him the glass of water. He swiftly downed it and looked to Kiyomi, who had latched herself onto Naruto's arm, all the while rubbing her assets up and down his appendage. "Need something, Kiyomi-chan?" he asked, keeping control of himself. Kiyomi frowned. "Can't I just want to cuddle with my fiancé?" she asked innocently. Normally, this is where Yujito would rein the horny two-tails in, but, instead, she too grabbed Naruto's free arm and began her own ministrations. Naruto sighed as he knew they wanted something but he couldn't figure out what it was. That is, until Kiyomi quickly reached up and planted her lips onto his, engaging in a playful tug of war. He spent a good 3 minutes on her before Yujito pulled Kiyomi away and slammed her own lips onto the blonde, surprising the two-tailed cat. He spent another 3 minutes kissing Yujito before she pulled back and Naruto took a moment to catch his breath. "What was that for?" he asked curiously. Kiyomi giggled. "Oh, simple. I have something I want to do with you tomorrow and wanted to make sure I had your full attention. Besides, we just wanted to kiss our fiancé," she said playfully. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Oh? What's that?" he replied. Yujito chuckled. "Simple, tomorrow you need to go with Kiyomi-chan on a date," she said happily. Naruto blinked before turning to Kiyomi. "Really? That's all you wanted? You didn't have to kiss me for that," he said. Kiyomi giggled. "Oh, I know. But really," she said before her voice turned dark. The sun was blotted out, and lightning crashed in the background. "If you say no, I'll make sure Kushina-chan doesn't make any ramen for a month," she said darkly. Naruto paled and quickly nodded his head yes, causing a ray of sunshine to appear on Kiyomi's face. "Good. Tomorrow, 11:30. Got it?" she asked. Getting a nod from her fiancé, she swiftly kissed him before dragging her twin off. Naruto looked to where she left and thought, note to self. Kiyomi-chan threatens when she really wants something to happen, whether it's necessary or not, he thought before shivering as he headed to take a bath. Author Kami Jutsu. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. Naruto shivered slightly before Tsunade busted out laughing. Fine Gaki. You can leave tomorrow. Now let's continue, she said, getting nods from around the room. No one noticed the twin devilish glints in Kiyomi's and Yujito's eyes. Later that day, 11:45 a.m. Namikaze Estates. The meeting ran a little late, so Kiyomi and Naruto were late getting home and ready for their date. Still, Kiyomi skipped happily down the Namikaze stairs wearing a simple blue kimono with her heeled shinobi sandals. She smiled as she noticed Naruto dressed in nothing more than some cargo pants and a shirt. She had told him she wanted this to be informal and he had followed her words well. Naruto smiled at her. Sorry we are late, but what did you want to do? He asked curiously. Kiyomi chuckled. Don't worry about it, and let's just walk around for now. I'll lead you to where I want to go later, she said, smiling warmly at him. Naruto nodded and held out his arm only to find it nestled between Kiyomi's generous bust, causing him to blush slightly. Well, let's go, she said happily, and she began to half-drag Naruto into the heart of Konoha. They spent 2 hours just flitting from store to store, never really buying anything, although they did eat some dango on the go for lunch, before Kiyomi began to drag Naruto to a more secluded part of the forest. All throughout their date, Kiyomi had made it a point to either rub up on Naruto or to make lewd comments, and she could tell that Naruto was getting hornier as the day went on. She just smirked as she had a surprise for him later. Kiyomi and Naruto eventually arrived at a large lake where no one was around. Kiyomi just chuckled as Naruto whistled in appreciation. Glad you like it, Naruto-kun. We will be staying here for the rest of the day. Kiyomi said, getting a nod from her fiancé before once again dragging him to a small pier nearby where a blanket, some fishing poles, and 2 lawn chairs with holders for their poles lay. They both sat down and grabbed a fishing pole before Kiyomi snuggled up to Naruto's side, seeing as they didn't sit in the seats. We have to catch our dinner, Naruto-kun, she said, smiling, causing Naruto to chuckle. Actually, that sounds like fun, he said, smiling back at the blue-haired Biju. Kiyomi giggled and rubbed her breasts against his arm once again. Naruto noticed her rather blatant attempts to arouse him and simply took them as a sign of her affection. After all, she was rather flirtatious without Yujito to rein her in. They spent a good half hour in silence while they caught several fish, before Kiyomi stood up and began to undo her kimono, much to Naruto's embarrassment. Whoa, Kiyomi-chan. What are you doing? He asked, looking away from her. Kiyomi looked at him and blinked owlishly, playing her innocent act for all it was worth. Just taking my kimono off, it's hot. Why, Naruto-kun? She asked. Naruto's sweat dropped. Kiyomi-chan. As beautiful as you are, I'd really rather it if no one saw you naked, he said, looking back at her only to find her smiling seductively at him, the innocent act gone as quick as it appeared. Wouldn't you want to see me naked, Naruto-kun? She asked lustfully, causing Naruto to blush bright red. Hey, he was still susceptible to taunting. Maybe. He stammered out, causing Kiyomi to giggle and drop her kimono to the ground. Naruto's jaw dropped as he took her in. She still had her blue sandals on, but her legs were long and slim, very easy on the eyes, while having a pale white color that gave her a somewhat angelic glow in the sun. Those legs led up to some wide hips and a slim waist, but her precious honey pot was covered by a simple blue bikini thong. Naruto gulped as he looked at that before his eyes trailed up to her toned stomach and onto her D-cup breasts, which jiggled as she continued to giggle, although they were tightly constrained by a 2 sizes too small bikini top. Kiyomi smirked as she watched his lustful gaze wash over her body, giving her chills as she thought of just how pleasurable his body could be against and inside of hers. Like what you see, Naruto-kun? She asked, still smirking. Naruto blinked and regained his self-control before smiling at her. Very much, he responded, causing her to blush lightly before she pushed Naruto to the ground and cuddled up next to him, her head on his chest as she began to draw circles on his abdominals. Good, but this date isn't just so we can spend time together. You said you wanted to get to know me, so ask away, she said, smiling as his hands began to caress her scalp even as she pushed her voluptuous body close to his own. Naruto sighed in contentment. Alright, so do you have any hobbies? He asked. Kiyomi chuckled. Well, I liked to mess with mortal men before I met you. It's rather amusing to watch them fall head over heels for a girl after all, she said, although she could feel Naruto's frown. Of course, I always went after the corrupt assholes. It's even more amusing to watch the guilty get caught all because they made a mistake trying to please me, she said, smirking. She could feel Naruto's chest relax a bit at that and sighed softly in relief. Naruto chuckled. Okay, anything else? He asked curiously. Kiyomi thought for a moment. I liked helping Shinigami-sama ferret out bad souls. It's rather rewarding to see them drop into the pits of hell, she said, giggling happily. Naruto's sweat dropped. You know, with your attitude, I sorta expected you to have some brighter hobbies, he replied. Kiyomi giggled again. Oh come on. Bright is boring. Besides, cats are naturally playful beings. It just so happens that playing to me is something dark, she said brightly. Naruto chuckled. As long as you don't hurt anyone innocent, I can live with that, he said smiling. Kiyomi smiled and snuggled into his chest. Good, she replied as his hands hit a particularly good spot behind her hidden ears, causing her to purr aloud. Naruto smirked and continued to rub that spot, turning Kiyomi in a blubbering mess of mules on his chest. So, how did you end up serving the Shinigami? Naruto asked, rather curious. Kiyomi purred softly and smiled. Oh, each Biju has a patron kami, usually. Inari-sama's is Hikari-chan's patron. Shinigami-sama is mine. Tsukuyomi is the Sanbai's patron, and so on. I think only Shukkeiku doesn't have a patron as he's batshit insane, she replied. Naruto nodded. Yeah, good thing I fixed Gaara's seal before sending him home. Stupid Shukkeiku wouldn't stop bugging the poor kid, he added, causing Kiyomi to nod against his chest. They spent the rest of the afternoon just chatting about each other and other mundane things before cooking the fish and staying out to watch the stars come alive. All through this, Kiyomi continually kept her body close to Naruto's own and noticed that he was almost always, at least, semi-erect. She smirked as they began to pick up and she got dressed in her kimono. They enjoyed a slow walk home, getting there around 9 p.m. seeing as they ate late. Most of the other girls were already in bed and they were able to make it to the second floor without being seen. I enjoyed today, Kiyomi-chan. I'm glad we could do this, he said, causing Kiyomi to smirk. Me too, Naruto-kun. But you still owe me a few things before this date is over, she said, smirking lustfully. Naruto raised an eyebrow only to be slammed against the wall and engaged in a passionate lip lock with his Hellfire cat. They continued to kiss for nearly 5 minutes before they broke away. That's enough for now. Enjoy the rest of your night, Naruto-kun, she said, smiling knowingly before heading to her room. Naruto shook his head before heading upstairs. He needed to find one of his girls. Kiyomi had done an amazing job of making him horny and he was ready to screw just about any of his girls into a coma. He stepped into his room and sighed before taking a deep breath to calm himself. That was a mistake. His eyes widened as his senses picked up the familiar scent of arousal and sex. Lemon warning. Please skip to next bold warning line if you are not of age. He looked around only to find his bed covered in a thin veil, not allowing him to fully glimpse who might be on the bed, although he could hear a light tingling. Now, he knew all of his mates' scents by heart, and this one was new. He walked forward slowly, not wanting to startle whoever was in his bed. He reached the veil and slowly opened it only to lay eyes on one of the most erotic sights he had ever witnessed. Yujito currently had her hand in her panties, which were soaked, and was softly touching herself, obviously creating the scent. Naruto noticed that between her legs was a wet spot that could only be her fluids from when she had reached an orgasm. He allowed his eyes to take in her slim-toned legs that held the same ethereal white color that adorned Kiyomi's legs before continuing up and past her moving panties to her delicious-looking stomach and perky nipples that he could see through the bra. His eyes locked onto the cotton necklace on her neck and he smiled seeing his present put to good use. He gulped as his gaze rested finally on Yujito's face, which was twisted into pleasure as her lioness ears twitched. Suddenly she opened her eyes and locked onto Naruto's own. He noticed her blushing, but the look in her eyes showed she had no shame in it. She slowly withdrew her hand from her panties, showing her 2 fingers glistening with her arousal. Oh dear, she said lustfully, it seems that I've dirted your bed, Naruto-kun. Whatever can I do to make it up to you, she asked, eyeing the noticeable bulge in his pants even as she licked her juices off her fingers. Naruto swallowed hard, but decided to play her game. He smirked. Well, since you've been a naughty kitty, I think you need to be punished, he said as her eyes twinkled in glee. The punishment should fit the crime, so. He took a moment to fake think about it before giving her a lustful smile. I think a nice rough mating should suffice, he said huskily as his own wolfish features showed. Yujito smirked and began to crawl towards Naruto as he divested himself of his clothing. She reached him and twisted herself to present her breasts to him. He took the hint and ripped the offending piece of clothing away before he began to fondle them, much to her pleasure. She thought back to yesterday when Kiyomi and her made this plan, and thanked her twin sister for suggesting it. Akuma Jutsu. Flashback no Jutsu. Kiyomi had dragged Yujito inside before she glanced outside and made sure that Naruto wasn't listening. Okay, I'm tired of waiting, she said childishly. Yujito raised an eyebrow. Tired of waiting for what? She asked curiously. Kiyomi growled softly, surprising Yujito. I know you wanna screw him and I'm tired of using my fingers every night, she whined, causing Yujito to go bright red. Kiyomi, she scolded her twin as they had agreed they looked far too alike to be called just sisters. Kiyomi whined and gave Yujito the kitten eye jutsu, causing Yujito's will to crumble in the blink of an eye. Ugh. Fine, she said blushing, causing Kiyomi to glomp her. Besides, I've always wondered if he's as good as they say he is, she said before giggling perversely. Kiyomi squealed in delight. I'm sure we will find out, my twin, in pleasure, she said happily as she began to explain that she would take Naruto on a date and make him horny while Yujito waited in his room so she could jump him when he came home. Kami Jutsu. Flashback no Jutsukai. Yujito was brought back to reality as Naruto hit a particularly sensitive spot on her left breast, which he had moved to after leaving the right one. She growled softly and he tail twitched behind her before she grabbed him and pushed him away. Naruto gave her a confused look until she stood up and pushed him onto the bed. She quickly divested herself of her soaked panties and gave Naruto his first look at her sacred entrance. Her bush was actually trimmed to look like a yellow lightning bolt and she could see he found that to be both kinky and amusing. She giggled before diving on top of him and putting her pussy right above his mouth. This bad kitty wants its milk, Naruto-kun. I hope you don't mind, she said seductively before she began to lavish his cock with a large amount of attention. Naruto moaned loudly as she began to kiss his lower head before she stopped and looked down between their bodies. Master, would you like to partake of my milk? She asked, changing the game slightly. Naruto blinked at the new name before smirking and taking a lick of her pussy from clit to asshole. Don't mind if I do, Nico-chan, he replied as he began to eat out his newest lover. Yujito smiled before descending on her lover's meat stick, her bell twinkling as she bobbed up and down on it. Naruto moaned into his lover's pussy as her hot mouth encased his cock. Her tongue was rough, but not unpleasurable as long as she didn't lick him raw. He knew that he wouldn't last long as Kiyomi had kept him excited all day. Knowing that, he thoroughly explored her pussy, trying to get her own orgasm to approach as fast as his own. Yujito mentally smirked as Naruto's tongue was easily forcing her orgasm to approach. If she had any doubts as to whether or not he was a good lover, they were thrown out the window as he continually found her weak spots and exploited them to full advantage. She moaned loudly as she felt her orgasm approaching and redoubled her efforts on Naruto's cock, feeling it stiffen and twitch in sign of his approaching release. Naruto groaned as he felt his orgasm approaching and decided to play a little before giving his lover what she wanted. He brought his hand up and roughly thrust 2 fingers into her tight snatch, causing her to yelp slightly at the sudden intrusion. Although, it soon turned into moans of pleasure as he pumped his fingers in and out of her slick love hole. I'm going to come, Nico-chan. Here's the milk you wanted, he warned as his mouth attacked her clit and they both crashed into their orgasms. Yujito moaned loudly around Naruto's cock as she began to swallow spurt after spurt of his precious seed. She, surprisingly, liked the taste and wasted no time in making sure none of it escaped her grasp. She could feel her pussy massaging the 2 fingers inside her, and her own juices which were being gathered up into Naruto's mouth, although some did stain the bed sheets. She moaned softly as she felt his stick go limp and her own pussy relax. Naruto gave a loud groan as he emptied himself into his golden-haired lover's mouth. He heard her eagerly swallowing every ounce of his seed and it was very arousing to know she liked his seed. Still, he wasted no time in trying to swallow as much of her juices as he could. He knew she had enjoyed this orgasm, but he had every intention of making sure that she nearly passed out from pleasure by the end of the night. The two slowly came down from their orgasms and Yujito rolled off of Naruto before turning over and cuddling into his chest. Naruto chuckled, so, he stated, getting Yujito's attention, do you like being my bad cat? He asked smirking. Yujito giggled before kissing Naruto passionately, I don't know yet, master, you have yet to really punish me, she said lustfully. Yujito suddenly found herself on her back and Naruto rubbed his hardened cock against her entrance. Oh, I was just waiting for you to recover because I don't want you passing out before I'm done, he said huskily. Yujito's eyes were wide and she blushed before looking away. She slowly adjusted her legs and hips to allow Naruto the perfect angle to claim her. I am a virgin, Naruto-kun. Please be gentle, she said softly, surprising Naruto. He blinked for a moment before nodding and smiling warmly. Of course, Nico-chan, he said lovingly before slowly entering her tight canal. He pushed nearly 3 inches of himself in before hitting her barrier. He looked her in the eye, and she nodded, before he pulled back and thrust himself balls deep into his newest lover. Yujito whimpered softly and Naruto whispered sweet loving words into her ear as he gently ground their hips together, hoping to create pleasure instead of pain. Soon Yujito gently lifted her hips, causing the two of them to moan softly as their conjoined sexes rubbed against one another. Naruto looked into her eyes and she smiled and nodded before he began to pump in and out of his lover, enjoying her tight hole as much as she was enjoying his well-endowed love tool. Yujito was tight. She wasn't the tightest yet, but she was definitely up there. She was also wet and slick, but that wasn't what made her special. Yujito's walls had a sort of grainy texture to it, almost like her tongue, but not as rough. The grains were soft and pliable, giving Naruto a very pleasurable massage, and increasing the heat building in her pussy, as he continued to feed his cock into her love canal. Yujito was on cloud 9. Naruto's cock had hurt upon first entering, but she had known that would happen. Once the pain subsided, however, pleasure coursed through her body like liquid fire. She could feel his cock against every contour of her pussy, and she could feel the small grains that created far more heat than the rest of her tight sacred entrance. She moaned loudly as Naruto began to pick up the pace, and wrapped her arms and legs around him, urging him to fuck her harder as the bell on her chest rang out with every thrust. Naruto grunted as he began to fully fuck his lover. He noticed her arms and legs wrapping around him and took that as a sign to really begin pleasuring his newest mate. He locked eyes with her even as she stared lustfully into his twin cerulean pools. He bent down and kissed her passionately, never stopping his thrusts, and their bodies created the lewd sound of skin on skin. Yujito moaned into his mouth, causing him to back off as they both tried to catch their breaths. She smiled lovingly at him. Kami you if you're good at this, she said before turning her head away blushing. I'm close, she said softly, before shifting herself slightly as he began to pound her cervix. Harder, she added loudly, throwing her head back in ecstasy as the two reached their orgasms. Naruto groaned loudly as Yujito's pussy clamped down on his cock and milked it for every drop of seed it could get, and his cock was all too happy to comply. He could feel her pussy slowly clench from the base of his cock up to his head, as if it was trying to force the seed out of his meat stick. He didn't complain however as he felt his cum bubble up and begin to spurt deep into his newest lover's womb. He noticed her eyes roll into her head from the pleasure and didn't waste any time as he clamped his teeth into her collarbone, marking her as his mate. Yujito was seeing stars as Naruto's cum began to splash into her womb. She hadn't expected him to reach her baby maker on the first try, but she surely wasn't complaining. She could feel her pussy clench around his cock and practically milk it, even as she mentally encouraged the act. She could feel her world crash around her as cock caused her to lose touch with reality and made her eyes roll into her head from the pleasure before being pleasantly surprised when he bit into her collarbone. She swiftly reached forward and claimed his left collarbone, the side without the other mate marks, and left her own mark on him. Naruto finally felt his cock twitch for the last time and slowly extricated himself from his newest mate. Mine, he whispered into her ear, causing her to shiver in delight as she took in her mark on his neck. It was a simple golden lioness twisting to the side so you could see its whole body. She slowly dozed off, knowing the next part of the plan. Naruto was surprised that Yujito had apparently fallen asleep after her first time and was rather disappointed. That is until he heard a slight jingling coming from behind him. He got on his knees and turned around only for his cock to grow hard once again. Kiyomi was currently feeding the growing stain on the bed as she continually thrust 2 fingers in and out of her soaking wet snatch. To put it simply, she was nearly a carbon copy of Yujito except her hair was blue, her bush was shaped into an Uzumaki swirl, and she had 2 tails instead of 1. She stopped masturbating as she noticed they had stopped moaning, and smirked lustfully at Naruto. I'm sorry master, it seems that you have 2 bad cats in your bed. Although I'm sure your man meat is more than enough to punish the both of us, she said huskily. Naruto chuckled and he made his way over to Kiyomi and set himself against her entrance, looking to her for acceptance. She smiled and kissed his lovingly. Yujito-chan and I share everything. I'm ready for you Naruto-kun, but I don't have a hymen like Yujito-chan, And I'm not going to be like Hikari-chan either, she said, warning her lover. Naruto nodded and slowly pushed himself in. After he was a few inches in, he pulled back slightly before moving forward and burying himself inside his second lover of the night. Kiyomi moaned loudly and wrapped her arms around her lover, breathing hard. "Kami, you're a big boy, Naruto-kun," she said, smirking. Naruto thrust forward slightly, causing her to yelp in pleasure. "Don't patronize me, Kiyomi-chan," he warned as he began to slowly thrust into her tight sheath. His eyes were suddenly drawn to something he missed before. Around her neck was a collar almost identical to the one he gave Yujito, except it featured a lioness instead of a blue nibby. He smirked as he realized it was a way to honor their bond. Kiyomi moaned in appreciation of the giant love stick currently moving in and out of her tight honey pot. He was large, for sure, and he changed his angle slightly with each thrust, obviously searching for the angle that would cause he to scream for more, and she was secretly hoping he would find it soon. She could feel her pussy massaging his cock and loudly acknowledged the pleasure he was causing her, happy that Naruto had finally claimed her. Naruto grunted as he buried himself into Kiyomi once again. Her pussy was much like Yujito's, having those same bumps and the stimulation that came with them. However, Kiyomi was hotter than Yujito, while Yujito was softer and tighter than her Biju counterpart. Still, he loved every second of making love to both of these girls, and he had every intention of making them scream his name before the night was through. Kiyomi yelped in pleasure as Naruto finally found the angle that allowed him to hit both her G-spot and her cervix with every thrust. Her eyes widened and Naruto smirked as he began to continuously pound into her pussy at that same angle. Kiyomi just laid back and wrapped her two tails around his thighs, aiding in his thrusts, before drool began to roll down her chin as she was lost in a sea of pleasure. Yes, Naruto was every bit the lover his other mates had claimed. Naruto smirked and began to pound Kiyomi's pussy, thoroughly encouraged by the fucked stupid look she was currently sporting, after finding the spot he was looking for. He felt her pussy tightening around his cock even as he noticed her body tensing. She was gonna climax soon, and he was right there with her. He thrust into her a few more times before she screamed in ecstasy and her pussy clamped on his cock, proving to be too much for him as he began to pour his cum into her womb. Kiyomi screamed in pleasure as her world exploded into sparks of pleasure. She'd had orgasms before, but none of them compared to the one that Naruto caused her. She felt her pussy tighten around his stick, and his cock as it twitched, sending his hot seed straight into her willing womb. All she saw was white until he bit her collarbone, which caused her to crash back into reality, and the pleasure, before biting him in the same place as Yujito, leaving her own mark. Naruto moaned as he felt his cock twitch inside of Kiyomi's hot love canal. Naruto came to a conclusion: all pussies loved cum, and Kiyomi's was no exception. Her pussy was milking him just like Yujito's and he had no reason to deny it the creamy reward it so desperately sought. He kept his hips pinned against her own as his cum flowed straight into her willing womb. He noticed the content smile on her face and smirked before leaning over and claiming his sixth mate, with her quickly following suit. As the two lovers came back down from their orgasms, they heard slowly pulled out of Kiyomi as Yujito smiled at her. "As good as we heard, huh?" she asked, smirking. Kiyomi was still breathing hard but nodded. "Even better," she replied, causing Naruto to blush in embarrassment. Yujito giggled and climbed over Kiyomi before dropping down and sandwiching their bodies together, causing their breasts to rub and earning moans from the still sensitive women. "I want this to take all night, but we don't have that much time," Yujito said before turning her body slightly and giving Naruto a lustful gaze. "I guess you'll just have to make the next two count," she said seductively, causing Naruto's cock to spring to life. Naruto blinked as he heard loud moans being emitted from his two lovers only to realize that the way their bodies were pressed together allowed their breasts to stimulate one another, and caused their clits to touch as they ground their bodies together. He smirked and decided he'd make them both come once more before finishing them off. He swiftly thrust his cock into Yujito's pussy, causing her moans to rise in pitch, and began to thoroughly pound her pussy even as his balls slapped against Kiyomi's entrance, causing her to moan as well. Kiyomi and Yujito were in heaven. For Yujito, her pussy was stuffed with the cock of the man she loved while being pleasured by her closest friend. For Kiyomi, she was currently being pleased by her container and twin, while her pussy lips were becoming swollen with juices as Naruto's balls continually pressed against her nether entrance. It was a pleasant sensation, but it was beginning to become torture as nothing was actually penetrating her. Naruto smirked as he felt Yujito's pussy clench around his cock. While she wasn't going to orgasm yet, She was well on her way, so he pulled out of her, causing her to moan in disapproval. He swiftly thrust 2 of his fingers into her pussy, causing her to moan in approval, before his left hand guided his cock right into Kiyomi's tight sacred entrance, earning a shriek of pleasure. He smirked and began to really pound his lover's pussy, hearing a loud wet sound every time he bottomed out inside of her thanks to his previous actions. Kiyomi shrieked in pleasure as her pussy was thoroughly abused by Naruto's man-meat, although she wasn't complaining. Yujito moaned in pleasure atop her as his fingers continued to pleasure her. They were both nearing their orgasms and increased their grinding, hoping to reach their release faster, and they didn't have to wait long. Naruto felt Kiyomi's pussy clenching, so he pulled out and then thrust his cock between their bodies, specifically right in between their clits. This caused the girl's eyes to go wide as he began to pump his cock between their bodies, causing them to scream in pleasure as their orgasms hit. Yujito saw stars as he pussy convulsed around Naruto's fingers. Her body tensed atop Kiyomi's and she let loose a scream as he fluids poured out of her love hole and down Naruto's dick onto Kiyomi's own nether lips, before pooling on the bed sheets below. Kiyomi, on the other hand, had nothing inside her, so she just felt her pussy throbbing, seeking something to grab as her juices flowed out of her honey pot. Both girls were breathing hard as they felt Naruto remove his cock from between them. They were dimly aware of him saying something before both moaned loudly in pleasure as their pussies were filled. Naruto smirked as he bottomed out inside his, still sensitive, lovers. "You said to make the last 2 count, well, I'm definitely going to show you bad kitties why it's a bad idea to masturbate on my sheets," he said lustfully before he began to pound into their cunts at a fast pace. Kiyomi, once again, allowed the drool to leak from her mouth as Naruto thoroughly stretched her pussy in pleasurable ways. She had yet to fully come down from her last orgasm, and this new sensation was causing her to experience multiple small orgasms in a row, something both dangerous and exhilarating. She was barely able to focus on Yujito, who was faring only slightly better than Kiyomi herself. Yujito moaned in pleasure as her pussy convulsed constantly due to Naruto's thorough pounding of her sensitive pussy. She, just like Kiyomi, was also experiencing many multi-orgasms, and it was causing her to rock back and forth in time with Naruto's thrusts, even as she felt a large orgasm building in her nether regions. She glanced back only to notice that Naruto was focused on pleasuring his mates, and that he would probably blow soon. Naruto groaned as he felt his mates' pussies convulse around his cock. He knew that girls could orgasm a lot, but this was ridiculous. Still, he wasn't complaining as he felt their bodies tensing even more. He knew his own end was close, but he wanted to wait until they were at their end before he gave them what they wanted. Still, that didn't last long as the girls decided to finish them all off. Yujito was able to gain her wits slightly and bent over to whisper into Kiyomi's ear. Kiyomi smirked and nodded before the 2 girls' tails pulled Naruto flush to their bodies as their orgasms hit, and they yelled, "Make us your dams, master," before letting their worlds crash as they felt Naruto's seed slam into their wombs. A dam is a mother cat. Kiyomi moaned loudly as she felt her pussy clench around Naruto's extra cock. She smiled in pleasure as she felt her womb be stuffed to the brim with Naruto's seed and was very content with the plans they had laid. She could feel Yujito tensing on top of her and knew they had all orgasmed at once. She felt Naruto's cock soften before being pulled out just before she let the sweet bliss of sleep claim her. Yujito let out a shriek of pleasure as her eyes rolled into her head again. Her cock rhythmically coaxed the seed out of Naruto's twitching cock until her womb was stuffed and her pussy was lubed with his cream. She moaned slightly as she felt Kiyomi beginning to relax beneath her and as Naruto's cock began to soften before it was removed from her sacred place, causing her to moan in displeasure. She was able to keep herself awake, however, unlike Kiyomi. Naruto grunted as his 2 newest mates proceeded to hold his body against theirs as his cum poured into their wombs like a fire hydrant. They were both wonderful lovers, and the comment at the end had been an incredible turn-on for Naruto. After all, very few of his lovers had openly admitted to wanting to bear his children. Still, he had complied with their wishes and pumped them full of his seed, until Kiyomi had passed out,